Good afternoon. The time is 5:31 on January 15th, 2020, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
Dr. Gasoi. Dr. Gasoi. Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg. Dr. O'Leary.
Present.
Mr. Parker is absent. Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams. Mr. Batchelor. Mr. Batchelor. Ms. MacLeay.
Present.
Ms. Burton. Ms. Burton. And Mr. O'Sullivan will be absent.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will proceed now with the business portion of our meeting. Representative Parker is unable to join us in person this evening and has requested that the State Board permit him to participate by phone. This requires approval of the State Board. I would ask for unanimous consent that Representative Parker be permitted to vote by phone this evening. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is agreed to, and Mr. Hayworth, you may call Mr. Parker. Great. Each year, the State Board must elect a president and vice president to provide leadership and oversight. As the longest-serving member of the State Board, by only about 5 minutes, it is my honor to serve as the election officer for the role of president. I will now entertain motions for the president. After all nominations have been received, candidates will have an opportunity to address the body for 1 minute. Seconds are not needed for nominations. Are there nominations to the role of president?
I'd like to nominate Ruth Wattenberg.
Ms. Wattenberg, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there further nominations?
I nominate Jessica Sutter.
Dr. Sutter, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Great. Are there any further nominees? Hearing none, nominations for president are closed. Ms. Wattenberg, yield you 1 minute for comments, and board members will each have time for comment as well.
Great. So I am happy to say that Marcus Batchelor and I are running for re-election as president and vice president of this great board, and we look forward to getting your votes and working with each of you afterwards. Last year at this time, we were somewhat divided, and I understand that there are still concerns, but despite that, we were ultimately able to adopt on a unanimous votes, a set of priorities, a set of research projects, move forward on revising social studies standards, and send our first ever legislative proposal to the council, which would require an annual transparent reporting of teacher turnover data. None of this could have been done, and certainly it could not have been done on a unanimous vote if there wasn't among everyone here a huge willingness and an interest in finding compromises that worked for everybody. And so I really thank everybody who was part of that. That's what allowed us to figure out the changes to original proposals that resulted in packages that ultimately everyone could support. In the past year, we continued our work on teacher turnover, which was begun under our previous officers, Jack Jacobson and Karen Williams. One great highlight of that work was that the DC Council held a roundtable on attrition, and the chair of our board's Teacher Retention Committee, Fraser O'Leary, was invited to testify and represented our concerns and views on this issue terrifically. I'll just say we had a really productive year, and I look forward to working with all of you this coming year to build on what we have accomplished.
Thank you, Ms. Wattenberg. Dr. Sutter.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. MacLeay, for the nomination. I'll say that I echo what Ms. Wattenberg said about the productive work that the board did in the past year. However, I'll say I would appreciate the comments of our dean of the board, Jack Jacobson, on the fact that our leadership style on the board could stand to be more collaborative. I like to think I've demonstrated that through my work as the chair of the Social Studies Standards Revision Committee. I've made sure to include all members, not just those on the committee, but all those on the board, in all of the emails deliberating dates for committee meetings, topics for committee meetings, etc. I think I've worked very hard to keep the board in touch and in strong communication on all those matters, as well as inviting them to participate in various events that I've hosted in Ward 6. So I appreciate the nomination. I would certainly be honored to serve were I able to garner the votes this evening, and I look forward to working with all of the board members in the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sutter. The record should reflect that Ms. Williams, Mr. Batchelor, and Dr. Gasoi have arrived. Additional comments from board members. We'll limit these again to 1 minute. I will just say, I'll take my minute now, please. I appreciate the work that the board has done over the past year. There was a bit of a learning curve because there wasn't any overlap in leadership. That sort of lost us a little bit of ground, which was unfortunate, but have been I'm looking at the next year with optimism, no matter how this vote turns out. Everybody learns from being in this role, and it is a role that I think Ms. Williams and I, having both served in the role, it's a difficult role as president. It's one where everyone has critiques and few people have praise. So understanding that, the current leadership team has had a full year to develop collaboration and to work to garner the votes of colleagues on the board, and I'll be interested to see if they've achieved that goal. Thank you. With that, Dr. O'Leary.
As a complete rookie at this, I just want to say that this last year has been a real education for me, and it's also been wonderful to watch a diverse board really pull together and work together on certain things, and I think that this next year will be even better than the last year.
Thank you. With no further comments, I'll ask our executive director to call the roll. You'll indicate your preferred nominee by saying that individual's name or voting present.
Dr. Gasoi.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Mr. Jacobson.
Dr. Sutter.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Dr. O'Leary.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Mr. Parker.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Dr. Sutter.
Jessica Sutter.
Ms. Williams.
Jessica Sutter.
Mr. Batchelor.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Ms. MacLeay.
Dr. Sutter.
Mr. President, Ruth Wattenberg has been elected.
Congratulations, Ms. Wattenberg.
Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to working with all of you and increasing our collaboration. Thank you all very much. Thanks for your support, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you in the next year. I will now entertain nominations for Vice President. After all nominations have been received, candidates will have an opportunity to address the body for 1 minute. Seconds are not needed for nominations. Are there nominations for the role of Vice President?
I would like to nominate Marcus Batchelor.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoi. I accept.
Are there other nominations for the role of Vice President? Okay. Seeing no further nominations, we have one candidate for the position of Vice President, Marcus Batchelor from Ward 8. And Marcus will have 1 minute to speak, and then we'll vote.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleagues. I'll be brief, as we were able to discuss last week at our working session, but I'll say publicly once again that I thank everyone for their faith in allowing me to lead over the last year. And I really believe that we have achieved so many of the goals that we set out together to do, which was to, I think, bring so many of the issues that we care about and so many of the constituencies that we represent from the periphery of the conversation around public education in the city squarely to the center. And I think that there's so much more work that all of us have to do together to advance that work even more. And so I look forward to being able to work with all of you and work with so many of our partners who've made this work so valuable and so enjoyable over the last year, and advancing that work in the year ahead. So thank you to my colleagues, and again, thank you to Dr. Gasoi for your nomination.
Thank you. The motion is now on the election of the vice president. Each member will be called and they will respond with the name of their preferred candidate. Mr. Hayworth will call the roll and announce the final vote.
Dr. Gasoi.
Marcus Batchelor.
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Marcus Batchelor.
Dr. O'Leary.
Marcus Batchelor.
Mr. Parker. Marcus Batchelor. Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Ms. Williams. Present. Mr. Batchelor.
Marcus Batchelor.
Ms. MacLeay.
Present and no.
Madam President, Mr. Batchelor has been elected as Vice President.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Batchelor. I look forward to continuing to work with you to better the outcomes and quality of education for the students of DC. And again, thanks to all of you. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. We have a request from Representative Parker to adjust the agenda so that we can move item 10, the administrative items, to item 7. Is there any objection to that adjustment? Okay, if none, seeing no objections, the agenda is amended to move administrative items to item 7 on the agenda. So I don't need to vote, okay. Okay, so that is approved. Are there additional corrections or additions to the agenda? Okay, so, John Paul, where am I going here? Oh, it's still after the, okay. Okay, members, we have the minutes from our January 8th working session before us. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing no changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. The motion being properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion is approved. Good evening. My name is Ruth Wattenberg. I'm the Ward 3 representative and the president of the DC State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the DC State Board of Ed, I welcome our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, January 15th public meeting. The State Board holds its regularly scheduled meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers here at 441 4th Street Northwest. The meeting is broadcast live via the District Knowledge Network, and it also live streams via Periscope on Twitter. The video for the meeting will be posted on our YouTube page at DC SBOE as soon as it is available. Our next official meeting of the State Board is our working session on February 5th, 2020, held here at 1 Judiciary Square, also broadcast on Periscope. I also want to note that due to winter break in many of our public schools, our February public meeting has been moved to February 26th. We will begin tonight with a ceremonial resolution for National School Choice Week. The ceremonial resolution is an honor used by the State Board to recognize organizations or individuals in the district. Tonight, after that, we will continue our discussion that we started last month on early reading instruction, especially on the training and support teachers need so that their screening and instruction is effective for all students, including those susceptible to dyslexia. We'll hear from representatives from SELA Public Charter School, the DC Reading Clinic, the Washington Literacy Center, and the Atlantic Seaboard Dyslexia Education Center. We will also consider resolutions related to the Birth to 3 Act and on preventing our youth from vaping. We heard testimony on both of these issues in December 2019. And now I'd like to turn to our State Superintendent, Hansel Kang, at this time for any statement she has.
Thank you, President Wattenberg. It's good to be with you this evening for the State Board's first public session of the new year. I hope you all had a restful and happy holiday. 2020 will be a busy year for OSSE and the State Board. Over the next year, we aim to continue our work to develop and incorporate measures of high school growth into the STAR framework. We will also be continuing our work to review the district's social studies standards. I look forward to engaging in this work with the board. I'm also pleased to see that the board will hear testimony on reading instruction this evening. I would like to provide some background for tonight's conversation. Through our adoption of the Common Core state standards in reading and language arts, the District of Columbia has set a high bar for what our students should be able to do. We are pleased that the district has seen steady increases in the number of students deemed college and career ready in English language arts. At the same time, we know that far too many of our students still need additional supports to demonstrate their full potential. We must continue to challenge our practices and policies to address disparities in achievement and provide the best instruction possible for our children. Although OSSE does not provide direct instruction to students in reading or in any other subject, we do support investments in statewide approaches to improve literacy for DC students of all ages. I would like to highlight a few of those efforts. OSSE's Division of Early Learning provides professional development courses for our early childhood educators free of charge. These courses cover topics such as phonological awareness and language development. Other courses include effective storytelling that broaden and deepen children's learning and identifying signs of delay to target children's specific needs as early as possible. OSSE also administers early literacy grants that support efforts in schools to improve reading for students before they reach third grade. OSSE's Division of Teaching and Learning provides professional development opportunities available to all educators in the district. This winter, we will provide sessions in topics such as culturally responsive literacy instruction, leveraging summative writing assessments to inform planning and instruction, bringing theater to life through literacy, and embedding universal design for learning principles to support writing instruction. OSSE will also provide an ELA Standards Boot Camp series for middle school educators that includes 4 half-day professional development opportunities. All of these trainings and more can be found in our professional development catalog located on our website. Finally, we also support adult literacy and education through our Division of Post-Secondary and Career Education. The board will also take up 2 resolutions this evening. As it relates to early childhood education, it is clear that the cost of childcare strains the budgets of many DC households, and the Bowser administration has worked to improve quality, access, and affordability of childcare for DC families. We are proud of the historic investments that we have made to the child care subsidy program over the past several years. And our subsidy program currently has no wait list, unlike that of many other states, meaning that any eligible family who applies can receive vouchers for care. We are also incredibly excited that we will exceed our goal of creating 1,000 new child care slots based on the mayor's investment in funds in the Access to Quality grant to support high-quality child care providers in coming online or expanding to create slots for infant and toddler care. This investment expands the supply of seats for our youngest learners, providing more accessible options for families. Finally, the board will consider a timely resolution on vaping this evening. From our most recent youth risk behavior survey, we know that 5.8% of middle school students and 10.9% of high school students in DC used an electronic vapor product in the past 30 days, which is higher than the number of students that smoked cigarettes or cigars. Between 2015 and 2017, we actually saw a decline of the use of electronic vapor products among high school students, but we need to ensure that we continue on this trajectory, and limiting access to vaping products commercially will certainly help. The DC Health Education standards that this board adopted with OSSE support begin covering the danger of alcohol, drug, and tobacco use as early as third grade, as well as strategies to say no and make good decisions for our students. Thank you again for allowing me to speak this evening, and I look forward to continuing to work with the board in the coming year.
Thank you very much, Superintendent, and thanks for all that you are doing on the literacy and early childhood areas. Our ceremonial resolution to begin with is CR20-1, recognizing National School Choice Week. Ms. MacLeay, would you like to make the motion?
I move. So moved.
The motion has been, second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded by Board Member Sutter. The resolution being properly moved and seconded. Mr. Hayworth, would you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution recognizing National School Choice Week, CR20-1, whereas all children should have access to the highest quality education possible, whereas DC recognizes the important role that an effective education plays in preparing all students in DC to be successful adults, whereas quality education is critically important to the economic vitality of DC, Whereas the purpose of National School Choice Week is to raise public awareness of the different K-12 education options available to children and families and to highlight the benefits of school choice. Whereas this year marks the 10th edition of National School Choice Week, which began in 2011. Whereas the week seeks to recognize the multitude of education options from which parents can choose for their children, including traditional public schools, public charter schools, magnet schools, private schools, online academies, and homeschooling. And whereas National School Choice Week will take place this year from January 26th through February 1st. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes National School Choice Week and the range of school options available to students in the District of Columbia and nationwide.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution?
Madam President. Thank you very much for letting me bring forth this ceremonial resolution as I have done in years past. School choice is about having options, and because every child is unique and different, and what may work for one family doesn't necessarily work for another, I'm proud to bring forth and recognize National School Choice Week now in its 10th year. It's about choosing what's best for each child. And in fact, board members on this board, such as my colleague Marcus Batchelor, participated in school choice when it was presented to his family in high school. Just last week, I was talking to my neighbor who was discussing the options that she had to send her child to school. And while she could have easily chosen to send her kid to the neighborhood DCPS school, Brent Elementary School, which is a fantastic elementary school, and if you haven't gone, I suggest you take a look at it. Instead, she chose a school down the street from us, another DCPS school, Tyler Elementary School, for its language immersion program. And this is just one of the many examples I hear about school choice options and the flexibility that we have in Washington, D.C. DC is often cited as the model for school choice in America because we do it so well, and I want to thank the early initiators of school choice in DC, Virginia Walden Ford, Kevin Chavis, and Don Hentz, among the others, many others who work so tirelessly to give children the best education for each unique child in this city. Many children who have stayed in DC to raise their own children here and or who now work in the school system today. For those who are interested, next week will be National School Choice Week, and for learning more about school choice in the city and the history of school choice in the city, there will be several screenings of the new film, Miss Virginia. I urge you to view it, and I can send you more information if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ms. Gasoi.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. President. I am going to abstain from this vote. I should say that I also have taken advantage of school choice. My daughter does not go to our neighborhood school. We adopted her from Taiwan, and so we were able to choose a school that is a Chinese immersion school, and I am grateful for that choice. I also had the choice of choosing a very good neighborhood school. My neighborhood school is Bancroft, a DCPS school, and I consider that real choice. When every family in the city has that kind of choice where they can go to their neighborhood school, but because they have a special need or desire, they choose a different school. That is real choice. I think in our city, choice has supplanted comprehensive planning and has been used as a lever for equity, and I think we can see that it's not really working alone. So we need more than choice. So I am going to abstain tonight.
Madam President?
Board Member Sutter.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Ms. MacLeay, for bringing this resolution forward. I'm pleased to vote in favor of the resolution tonight. I represent 34 schools in Ward 6, 19 DC public schools, 2 of which are citywide schools of choice, 15 public charter schools, and I'm pleased that the students in the schools in my ward come from all of the wards of the city. So when I ran for office, I said that I was going to represent all of the schools in Ward 6, wherever their students came from, and all of the children in Ward 6, wherever wherever they chose to go to school, and this resolution represents exactly the reason why. I believe that every family knows what is best for their child and absolutely deserves the choice of their neighborhood school or another school they believe will better serve the needs, interests, skills, and talents of their child. Thank you very much for bringing this resolution forward tonight.
Further discussion? Mr. Batchelor?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleague for this introduction. I will be voting in favor of the resolution. I represent 46 schools in Ward 8, 26 of them public charter, 20 of them DC public schools. And as was mentioned earlier, my mom was one who had the opportunity to not just send me to a school that had the quality that I deserved, but also met my particular needs and interests. And I'm grateful that some of our students around the city also have that. I think it's also important to acknowledge, however, that even in our vast economy of schools around our city, so many families don't see it as choice, but see it as really grappling for a chance. And in this next era of school choice in the District of Columbia, we've really got to hone in not just on the quantity, but on the quality, and making sure that wherever our students go, that they can get the quality of education they deserve. As I mentioned earlier, I represent Ward 8 and represent 46 school communities, but it's no secret that so many of our families are still grappling for the very few options they see as quality around the city. And so we've really got to hone in on that and make sure that all of our families, to Dr. Gasoi's point, have true choice in our city. That they're not just searching for a chance and hoping and praying, but that wherever they send their child, wherever they choose to send their child, they can guarantee that they'll have the quality and supports that they need and deserve. And some of those things are going to be tough discussions in this next era, in this next decade of school choice, but they're necessary ones. And so I look forward to working with all of my colleagues and those who care about true choice in our city to achieve those lofty goals of really making sure that school choice meets its original objective for all of our students. So thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay, we are now, okay, the ayes have it, the motion carries. We're now, per our change of agenda, we're going to move to the administrative items. So first is our 2019 annual report. The members and staff of the State Board prepare a formal report yearly to the residents of the district. This year's report contains information about the work of the State Board in bringing the vital issue of teacher retention to the forefront of policy discussions. The report also highlights our work in exploring the STAR rating, particularly around high school growth, as well as the work of our two independent offices, the Office of the Ombudsman and the Office of the Student Advocate. The State Board is deeply committed to listening to and responding to the needs we hear from our communities. This report demonstrates that commitment. Is there a motion to approve the 2019 annual report?
So moved.
A motion has been made by Ms. Gasoi, Ms. MacLeay, and seconded by Mr. Batchelor. Being properly moved and seconded, is there discussion on the adoption of the annual report? Mr. Batchelor?
Just very quickly, I want to thank the members of our staff who worked very hard to present in such a tremendous way all of the work that both the elected members of this board, our student members, and our staff have led over the last year. And I think it's so important that we spread this as widely as possible to demonstrate to district residents what a truly independent voice in our education conversation, how meaningful that is to our families. And I think all of the work encompassed in this definitely shows that. The second and last thing would be that I would thank my colleagues for doing all of the work that can now be presented in this report. And I know that there's so much more that we have to advance on the priorities outlined in this, but also our goals moving forward. And I look forward to working over the next year to achieve even more for our district students and families. Thank you.
Board Member Gasoi?
Well, Thank you to my colleague, Mr. Batchelor, for saying exactly what I was going to say and saying it better than I would have said it. So I just want to thank our staff. You are amazing, and it's very comforting to know that you are there when we need assistance, when we need information, and you know, the quality of this report, I think, really reflects the kind of support that we get from you really all year. So thank you so much.
Agree. Any other conversation? Ms. Williams?
Again, I'd like to reiterate how great our staff is, especially, well, I'm not going to call anybody out, but we have a great staff, and this is a monument to the credibility of all the hard work you do, and I want you to know that I personally appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Madam President. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you.
Further comment? Mr. Jacobson?
Et cetera, et cetera. No, this is fantastic. I think there are some additions this year that really make this something that we can all be proud of. I don't agree with everything in it, but I certainly support the work that's been done by our team and by our committees that are so vital to make sure that we can do more work than each of us could individually. We can achieve more working together. So really appreciate that. I'd hope that for 2020, we could have a vote on the annual report in 2020 so that if there are board members who are not moving into 2021, we would have the opportunity, as we have in years past, to vote on that while we're still in office. Thank you.
Point noted. Okay, seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of the 2019 annual report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, thank you. And again, thanks again to all the staff work that went into it. It's really beautiful. Okay, next is the resolution on the Birth to 3 Act. A growing body of evidence suggests that experiences in early childhood are the foundation for the health and development of children well into their adult lives. And research has demonstrated that the first 3 years of life are especially critical to the healthy development of children. Early childhood programming has been a priority for the District of Columbia, and in 2018, the Council for the District of Columbia unanimously passed the Birth to 3 for All DC Act. But in 2020, the act was only partially funded. I'd like to turn to my colleague and Ward 5 Representative Zachary Parker for a motion on the resolution. Mr. Parker? Second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Batchelor. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Haber? You need someone like you for you.
State Board of Education resolution in support of fully funding the Birth to 3 for All Act of 2018, SR20-1. Whereas the DC State Board of Education recognizes that early childhood experiences beginning from birth to age 3 set a significant foundation for the health, future learning, and behavioral development of children that will help enable them to lead healthy lives. Whereas research shows that the first 3 years are uniquely critical to the healthy development of children, and access to high-quality care and education can also help parents remain active in the workforce and strengthen the local economy. Whereas the district is experiencing a shortage of formal early childhood education seats, with estimates as high as 28,000 seats according to a 2018 Bainham Family Foundation study, whereas Black and brown families disproportionately face barriers in accessing affordable, high-quality early childhood education and healthcare services for their children. Whereas the Birth to 3 for All DC Act of 2018 was signed into law and went into effect on October 30th, 2018, which provides the legislative framework for the district to provide comprehensive health and child care supports through connecting families with home visiting services, developing a competitive compensation scale for early educators, and more. Whereas the Act builds upon the district's efforts to improve early childhood care and education, maternal health, and family economic stability through initiatives such as universal pre-kindergarten, paid family and medical leave, and more. Whereas the Act remains only partially funded. And whereas investing comprehensively in the education, health, and well-being of infants and toddlers and their support networks can yield major long-term benefits for our city and its families. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education supports the full funding and implementation of the Birth to Three for All Act of 2018.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution? Mr. O'Leary?
Yes, line 28 states that whereas the act remains only partially funded, and that's a crime. This is the act of 2018, and for us to go into the year 2020 without full funding for this Birth to Three for all is unconscionable, and the public needs to rise up and make sure that this is taken care of quickly.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, sorry I did not recognize you earlier.
Thanks, Madam President. I am proud to put forth this resolution and will be even prouder to vote for it because I see it as an opportunity to build on the progress that the district has made. The district currently leads the country in the number of 4- and 5-year-olds enrolled in school, and that undoubtedly has contributed to the gains and increases we're seeing across the district in our schools, and that is something we should all be proud of. This resolution speaks to the need for us to do even more for younger students under the age of 3, and sends a message that as a board, we see the importance of early childhood education and how it connects to our priorities and focus areas. And so for that reason, I am proud to stand with advocates and my colleagues on the board and those across the city who are joining us in this call to fully fund Birth to Three. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ms. Sutter, and then Ms. Gasoi.
Thank you very much, President Wattenberg. I plan to vote in support of the Birth to Three for All resolution because I believe that our city has done an amazing job of expanding opportunities for young children to attend preschool and pre-K education here in the city, but I think now we need to continue that effort and go further. I was very pleased to work for the Gray administration during the expansion of high-quality childcare opportunities in the city. I know that Councilmember Gray was instrumental in this legislation being proposed and passed, and I think now the council needs to go one step further and ensure that it gets funded. I'm particularly interested in seeing the increases in pay for our early childhood educators, particularly in childcare settings. They take care of the very youngest children in our city, the most vulnerable residents of our city, and they deserve fair and equitable wages on par with those who care for our children in K-12. Thank you.
Ms. Gasoi.
Thank you. Excuse me. I just want to echo what my colleagues, Mr. Parker and Dr. Sutter, have said. And just, I want to say that I have a lot of friends who actually make what would normally be considered a living wage, but many parents have foregone their job actually because they wouldn't make enough to cover childcare. So this is a really pressing problem, and I do want to emphasize that this is an equity issue, because if folks who are making a pretty good wage are having trouble, then obviously this is a real problem for folks who are struggling already. And I think, as Dr. Sutter said, that, you know, I am very proud of the progress that our city has made on universal pre-K 3 and 4. And so I know this is possible, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this done. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yes.
Ms. MacLeay.
So this legislation is important to me because first, I'm the first person on the DC Board of Education who's first member to have actually given birth while in office. And in fact, I'm the only one on this board at this time whose family this legislation may affect personally. However, I will be voting no on this legislation. This legislation and this resolution puts forth and asks for $50 million. $50 million is a lot of money that needs to come from somewhere. Where will that tax money come from? Have we thought about the burdens it'll currently put on taxpayers? Will members of this board rally and cry when funding may have to be taken from another area, like our schools? Or, as the mayor's office stated in its letter to the council, that it might be taken from the Universal Paid Leave Program, which, again, another program I don't like the way it was implemented. But when they see this come budget time, where will the money come from? Where is the fiscal impact? You know, I find this to be a fiscally irresponsible bill in the way it's currently set up. And while great in theory, it actually limits and takes away options from some parents. In fact, it may very well push out the very constituents that it's in theory trying to help, our poorest families and those who do not speak English. Furthermore, the Board of Education is not a legislative board. It's a policy approval board. We should let the legislative and executive powers of our city, the council and mayor's office, handle these pieces of legislation. I encourage the members of this board to remember that when they bring resolutions to the table. And if anyone would like to see the letter from the mayor's office, or if anyone has taken any time to see for any opponents on the legislation, I'm happy to share that information with the board members that are currently voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No. Mr. Batchelor? Jack, are you trying to get in?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to Mr. Parker for his introduction. I also want to, I think we'd be remiss if we also didn't acknowledge the residents of our city who have come to this board to testify on the importance of this legislation and the importance of birth to 3 programming. It's so critically important as a person who started school at 3. But also the son of a mother who had to leave the workforce to make sure that I had the quality of care that I needed before I could start school, and the son of a mother who went on and rejoined the workforce as an early childhood care provider. I think this is critically important, not just so that our youngest people, especially our students at risk of being left furthest behind, get the quality instruction that they need in their earliest years of development, but I think to Dr. Sutter's point, making sure that those hardworking folks who provide that critical care are adequately compensated, I think is so important. And while as a leader of a very small district agency understand the need for fiscal restraint and responsibility, I also I think balk at the fact that everything has to be a zero-sum game in our city, in a city as prosperous as ours, that if we do one thing critically important, that something else critically important has to fall through the cracks. If you look at our city's bank account, you can tell that that is not true. We have the resources, we just need the will, and I am encouraged that so many of our colleagues have decided to urge those who do have authority over this, the council and the executive, to find the will to do this critically important work and do it fully as district residents desire. So again, I thank Mr. Parker for the introduction, and I look forward to enthusiastically supporting the resolution today, but also working after we leave this meeting to ensure that the funding is found in this next budget cycle, and that we fulfill our promise to provide quality of care for every district child and family. Thank you.
Any others? I'll just say one thing. We are a policy board, but we're also an advisory board, and I would not be in favor of us spending a lot of time creating a lot of advice for other people. But I do think on key issues that deal with the education of the kids in the city, we are entirely within our rights and obliged to make a comment, and I will be supporting this because I think it is so important to the quality of education that the ability of our students to succeed once they enter our education system. Thank you very much, Mr. Parker, for submitting it, and we're ready for a vote. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay. All right, next. Thank you. All right. Okay, next, at our December 2019 public meeting, the State Board heard testimony from public witnesses on the rise of underage use of e-cigarette products among the district's student population. I'd like to turn to Vice President and Ward 8 Representative Marcus Batchelor for the motion.
So moved, Madam President.
Is there a second? Second from Ms. Williams. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, the resolution will be read into the record. Mr. Hayworth?
State Board of Education resolution on protecting our kids from big tobacco, SR20-2. Whereas the State Board of Education is committed to ensuring that all District of Columbia students acquire the skills and knowledge to lead healthy, productive lives. Whereas in 2016, the State Board of Education voted on the health education standards that outline expectations for awareness and behaviors regarding the use of nicotine and other drugs. Whereas the Surgeon General of the United States has stated that the nicotine in e-cigarettes can harm the developing brain, impact learning, memory, and attention, and increase risk for future addiction to other drugs. Whereas according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey, while the youth cigarette smoking rate has dropped to a historic low of 5.8%, because of e-cigarettes' enticing flavors, aggressive marketing, and high levels of nicotine, 27.5% of high school students nationally report having tried e-cigarettes in the past 30 days. Whereas 21.4% of current e-cigarette users in high school and 8.8% of users in middle school report daily e-cigarette use. Whereas 72.2% of high school students that use e-cigarettes report using flavored products. Whereas Juul Labs is alleged to have targeted youth through flavored tobacco products and advertising campaigns that misled consumers about the highly addictive quality of their products, according to District of Columbia Attorney General Carl A. Racine in a lawsuit against the major e-cigarette manufacturer. Whereas the 2017 DC Youth Risk Behavior Survey found that 16% of middle school students and 29% of high school students reported ever using an electronic vapor product in their lifetime, and that more high school and middle school students in the district report using e-cigarettes than regular cigarettes. Whereas the DC Department of Health in October 2019 confirmed the death of at least one district resident associated with vaping and advised residents to stop using e-cigarettes. Whereas there are currently 3 bills regarding the restriction of selling and distributing electronic smoking devices currently under DC Council review. And whereas parents, schools, students, and public health organizations, including the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, American Lung Association, the DC Tobacco Free Coalition, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch have called on the D.C. Council to take action. Now therefore be it resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education recognizes the dangers of using e-cigarettes and other vaping devices on student health and wellness. Be it further resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education calls for stronger tobacco and vaping education in all public and public charter schools in the district so as to better inform students of the consequences and dangers of using these products. Be it finally resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education calls upon the D.C. Council to take all flavored tobacco products off the market.
Mr. Batchelor for comments.
Thank you, Madam President. I won't pontificate, I think, more than we already have on this issue. I again want to thank the coalition of young people and their adult mentors who've come to the board to talk about this critical issue and are leading a campaign around the city, both to bring more awareness, but to also urge the council. I was able to join my Ward 4 colleague, Dr. O'Leary, at the council earlier this month, actually right after the new year, at one of the council's first hearings of the year, which was on several bills that look to address this critical issue. And I look forward to continuing that advocacy until we find a solution. I think the dangers are clear and present for our students. And as a member of the generation that we thought was going to kill smoking, to see the generation after me really begin a new habit in such a dangerous way is dismaying. And I think for those who care about the long-term health and development of our young people, this issue has to be critically important. So I thank my colleagues and I thank everyone advocating for this issue.
Other discussion on this resolution? Ms. Gasoi? Ms. Williams?
This is not so much on the resolution, but Dr. O'Leary and myself said that we would like to take the word kids from this resolution and change it to students or scholars or something. Because you know why, right?
I'll accept it as friendly.
Yes, it's a friendly.
Okay, we'll make that change. Other discussion? I've got Mr. Jacobson and then Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you, President Wattenberg. I think I really appreciate the context in which this resolution was brought forward, and it's so important that the district agencies collect data and analyze data. We need to know what's going on with our children, and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and similar measures are what help us craft these types of public policies and get ahead of problems. So really appreciate all that the district does in terms of that. Really appreciate my colleague from Ward 8 for bringing this resolution forward, and I'm happy to support.
Other discussion? Mr. O'Leary?
I'd like to just make everyone aware of how dangerous this particular product is for our students. And so that we, as Mr. Batchelor and I testified, there were around 80 people testifying in front of the City Council, and there were 4 people testifying for vaping products, all of them part of the industry. And there were 76 other people who were adamantly opposed to our children being seduced by the industry. So I think that this is something that we as a board, we have to advocate for our students. We know that we're a policy board, but we're also advocates for our students' health and well-being along with their education. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. MacLeay?
So I will be voting no on this resolution tonight. Many of my board members already know several of the reasons why, but I want to make it very clear that obviously no person on this board advocates for children smoking or using habitually vaping or nicotine products. That is not the underlying issue. The underlying issue of this resolution tonight is first the manner in which it was brought forth. There was no time, the only advocates were called in the presence of notifying other board members. There was no time to let those in potential opposition to the resolution know and bring forth members for the public to come forth. Secondly, there have been several instances and statistics brought forth to the board, whereas it hasn't been they aren't necessarily statistically true. For instance, while these flavors may entice kids, they are also used as smoking cessation products for adults to stop smoking and to stop the habitual use of nicotine, which can help our families, many of those parents who use these products, get them to stop. Do we want them to use nicotine products? No, we do not. Under the same survey that many of these statistics have been used, those same parents have said they will go back to smoking when they do not have the flavored nicotine products. Secondly, in lines 35 through 36 of this resolution, I want to make it clear. It said, in October 2019, confirmed the death of at least one district resident associated with vaping. This product that was used with a black market marijuana product, not a flavored nicotine product, and not any product that any student could get through any of the smoking resolutions, smoking legislation that the council is currently offering. Furthermore, I want to make note that sin taxes in DC, in our city, currently account to approximately $1.6 million of our budget. That $1.6 million, much of it goes towards funding our schools and in our school budget. And we have not thought through fiscally how we will actually take that money that is no longer used by taking these products off of the market that is legal for adults to consume, and how we're going to get that money from our budget. Last but not least, again, this Board of Education is not a legislative board. I think it's the legislative and executive powers of our city to handle these pieces of legislation. The FDA has already moved to limit many of the parts of the legislation put forth, and those are several of the reasons why I will be voting no. Thank you.
Other comment? Just one point I would like to make is the resolution has been circulating since the late fall, so there has been opportunity for people to come if they want. The other thing I just want to say is in my neighborhood, there's a store that sells many of these products right near our junior high, our high school, and our elementary school, and there's an enormous amount of unhappiness in the community there. So with that in mind, I do hope that the DC Council will take action on this. All right, with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Okay, the ayes have it and the motion, the ayes have it and the motion carries. Okay, we are ready to turn to public comment. Thank you all. The State Board welcomes public participation in activities under our authority. At every public meeting, we begin with testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments will become part of our official record. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Tonight, we have 9 public witnesses. If witnesses have provided written comments for the record, they are available on our website. As I call your name, please come down to the table. Lyric Johnson, Travius Butler, Naija Hawkins, Brian Wheeler, and Angel Johnson. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sitting with us as we got to this part of the meeting. I'm going to, if it works, I'm going to start here on the right, and I'm going to move down. Okay. And you each have 3 minutes to speak this evening. Please note that you must use your mic. Your mic is already on. The light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, then it will turn yellow for the last 30 seconds, and then it will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. And after all of you have spoken, some of us on the dais may ask you some questions for further clarification. Okay, please begin when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Lyric Johnson, and I'm 18. I'm 16 years old. I didn't mean to say 18. I've been the leader of the fight to save my school, me and my peers. During this fight, we have been lied to, ducked by the chancellor, and stigmatized. This is what they always do to black people, and nobody seems to care. When I'm done, people say they care, but then nothing will change. What do students of WashMet have to do to make change? When will our voices matter? I've had a long journey where I was stabbed by a student, traumatized by a family member, been transferred around the city, and when I finally had found a home, you all want to take it away. I've seen one thing, and I've said one thing, and I've said it so many times. Everyone wants to talk about us, but nobody wants to talk to us. We all know it's because we're poor, black, and our parents aren't always involved. Same old story that people in power don't care about. But when somebody dies or goes missing, people wonder why. Yet they don't care about our school or where we come from, or they don't connect any dots. It is sad, and all the leaders in the city should be ashamed of what's going on in Washington Met. I will miss my school and all the people I made friends with. I wish the city would hear our voices, but we all know the decision has already been made. Without the school, I wouldn't be here and would probably be dead or locked up. That is why the murder rate keeps rising and will keep rising. But I wish you all would connect the dots of how and see how lack of supportive education connects with these kids' deaths in the streets. It is because nobody is watching them. Met watches over us from the time we leave the building to the time we come back in. Be honest to us. How can you help us?
Thank you.
You speak to her, and then.
No, we're going to go through. We go through the whole panel, and then we'll come back and ask questions.
Okay, so I know I have
three
minutes,
minutes.
so I may talk fast. So I apologize.
Okay, and we'll come back to you in Q&A.
So my name is Brian Wheeler. I'm a licensed clinical social worker for over 15 years, DC resident for over 10 years in Ward 6, and a Washington Met social worker. So first I want to read a quote from Chancellor Farabee in May 2019. One of the questions that he was asked at the Education Dive by Roger Riddell was, what are some of your overarching plans, May 2019, what are some of your overarching plans coming out of your first 100 days, especially as far as restoring the public trust in the district after some of the scandals in the recent years? What Chancellor Farabee said, the first acknowledgement that I've been really clear about is that you don't build trust overnight. You can only move at the speed of trust. For me, the work in DC will be very measured and calculated based on where we are in that trust spectrum. It's really important to it's important to really be responsive to the needs and the things that I've heard from staff, the community, and students and family, and this is in May 2019. We've been told on numerous occasions that the school decision has already been made. We have lost DCPS's trust, and the community has lost DCPS's trust. At the community meeting, 93% of community members disagreed with the proposal. There are at least 5 buildings that we know of that are vacant that Met could inhabit, including Spin Garden, Winston, Farabee Hope, Fletcher, Johnson, and Marshall. I know some of those are not high schools. Many of you, or maybe some of you, have seen the pictures. At this point, what has happened in the last 5 years is educational neglect, and it is a crime. Make no mistake, this is criminal. Recently, the DC Auditor report, the mayor and DC Council, I don't know if people had a chance to read the report because it just came out. I want to say on Monday, I could be wrong, the DC Auditor report on public education. And their third advice was that the mayor and DC Council should ensure equitable funding for schools serving the largest percentages of students classified by the district as at risk. Washington Metropolitan High School was deemed the highest need risk in the city, based by the Department of Behavioral Health. Enrollments declined over time for most schools serving the largest percentage of at-risk students because many families chose to opt out of those schools. Whether in terms of demand for the schools in the My School DC lottery, the percentage of DC students attending their in-boundary DCPS schools and distancing travel to attend schools, a recurring theme in this report is that DC families, so I'm gonna skip that. So yet schools serving the largest percentage of at-risk students may conceivably need more, not fewer, resources to meet the needs of their students. Washington Met has consistently not received what they needed to. I'm going to skip this because I know that, but I would just read the report or skim it because it basically highlights specifically what happened to Washington Met and what they did not get. And I want to say that this process is an illusion, and I will point to, if I could say real quick, to Jessica Sutter, who she wrote a great dissertation, which I clearly have no life because I read it. But one of the things was about charter schools closing, and I think it's a really interesting piece. And I know it's not specifically related to DC public schools, but I would suggest that everybody should read it because I read it and I was very well informed. So thank you for that. So my 3 quick questions are: can you make sure that the student satisfaction surveys are not used to promote closure of a school? You should not take student satisfaction surveys and use it against them the next year. And if you do that, put it in there. put it in that this could be used to transfer your schools. The second is when schools are given resources and reported that they have these resources, how can we hold the schools accountable and prove that they have the resources? And how can you help Washtenaw in their current progress? And finally, real quick, I want to say Emily has helped us greatly. She wrote a great piece in DC Line, and just overall, she's been amazing. So if everybody is like her on the board, I'm really happy about that. That's it, the end. Sorry.
Thank you on behalf of both of those board members. Take the next person.
My name is Andrew Johnson. I am a 20-year-old, and I am a senior at...
It's hard. Can I move it?
Could we restart her?
Yeah.
My name is Andrew Johnson. I am 20 years old. I am a senior at Washington Metropolitan Opportunity Academy. My daughter is 6 months old, and I'm gonna miss my school a lot, but Washtenaw was there for me and always checked on me. We need a small school in DC where students who aren't understood and can find a home, work through their issues. I don't know any other small school that gives gives hands-on support and experience like the staff and teachers at Washtenaw. From a student's perspective, Washtenaw lack a lot of resources, because I went to Luke Seymour and they had a bunch of resources and opportunities, while Washtenaw has none. That's unfair because opportunity academies should have the same opportunities and we don't. Why are we supposed to believe that DCPS will help us and transfer and give us the same one-on-one support that Washtenaw doesn't have? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi. I don't know if you get me. Sorry. Thank you. Hi, my name is Naija. I'm 18 years old, and I have a son. For 2 years, I was out of school because I became pregnant, and I was at NA Costia, and they didn't accept my maternity leave. Because my boyfriend attended the Met and graduated, he told me about the school. This whole year, I have received love from staff and AKA my mother, Miss Mason. I do not understand why you are closing my school. I do not understand why I'm constantly lied to about what is going on with our school. Just on Saturday, the lady said that she thought the decision of the closure was already made. I feel like I have been lied to and nobody has answers for us, but everyone expects a young mother to make it happen. Every day is hard and I try to make it the best every day. Matt is always there for me even when nobody was. How can this education board help me and my son? And are you going to make sure I make it to the next school? And how can you help me?
Thank you very much. Mr. Butler? I assume you're Mr. Butler.
No.
Hello, my name is Travis, and I have really bad social anxiety, so if I stutter, that's why.
You and Joe Biden, I just want to say. He's a big stutterer. So.
When I came to Met, I didn't like anyone. I didn't speak to one, and because I had a rough previous years at other schools. I was kicked out of HD Wilson because of my attendance and basically being myself, because I'm really playful and goofy, and they couldn't handle it, so they just kicked me out. Matt wasn't really okay with my sense of humor at first, but once they got to know me, I stopped being such as a butt as I was before. So, and it became like a family to me. I haven't really worked at any other schools, and I feel like, so they basically slowing my school down, and I have to, if I don't graduate this year, I have to go to another school, and that's not right, because I'm going to really have troubles opening back up and people liking me for who I am. And I also feel like DCPS is just for the rich people, and because if the school was meant for Caucasian kids and stuff like that, and they had problems like we have, I feel like DCPS will put the resources and the time and to give that school the attention like they should, but obviously they don't give us to us now. And my question is, how can you ensure that we get the right resources at our next school? Thanks.
Thank you all. Board members, we will have a round of comments and questions if people want to ask them. Each member will have 2 minutes to both question and get responses, so we urge you to be concise. What? Yeah, I mean, we can see how it goes. We have a long night, but if people have a second round of questions, we'll figure out how to deal with that. Comments? Do you want to start? Okay.
First, I want to say thank you to all of you for your testimony, and I appreciate the labor of love it was to read the dissertation. It's like 240 pages long. Mostly, though, I want to echo what I know from my dissertation in what I heard from the students tonight. So the school closures in DC have disproportionately affected Black and brown students. That's not a question, that's not an opinion, that's a stated fact. In the charter sector and in DC public schools, the schools that are closed are schools that are attended by Black and brown children. And I think that that is something we all have to look in the face and ask why that is and question it. One question I have, though, is I heard Naija say that the school didn't provide you with parental leave when you were pregnant. Is that standard? Is that policy that our traditional high schools will not allow students to take time off to give birth?
It is, but I didn't get mine. They try to blame it on my attendance from like 2 years ago, and they said just because 2 years ago I missed so many days that they wouldn't accept it.
Okay. That is incredibly concerning to me, because I think we know that, you know, there's no way around the fact that it takes time to have and raise a baby, and that our schools have a vested interest in making sure that our students graduate. Last question with my 40 seconds. A lot of you have mentioned that things are lacking at Washington Met, and I've read about it, I've heard your testimony. If there was something you could have provided that would improve your school experience, what would it be?
Reading, at least reading 180, because a lot of kids in DCPS cannot read, and they took all these reading interventions out, and these kids don't know how to sign an application or fill out an application just off the fact that they cannot read. And this has been going on for years in DCPS. So we need some type of reading intervention to help these kids read.
And can I say real quick, as far as this is a big issue in schools, what I would call opportunity schools, is that they place them on Summit Learning, they place them in front of computers, and that is a huge issue. Some of these kids need that bond. They don't just need to be taught history, they need to be taught with an attachment-based person being able to teach them, because a lot of these kids are basically wards of the state. Their parents aren't involved. And so it's not just history, right? History on a computer is not going to work. And you see the trend across the country. What is going on? Rich schools are taking computers and technology out of their classrooms. Why is that? Well, we all know why that is, right? Because it's not helpful. But unfortunately for the kids, it's like they're stuck in front of a computer, and it's basically you pass if you have green, if you're on orange, you still need help, and then if you're on red. So they basically know 3 colors, and then they may or may not talk to the teacher about it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Gasoi.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, and also just for your tireless advocacy. I know I've seen you around a lot lately, and I'm amazed at the energy that you are having to put into this fight, and that, as I heard you say tonight, you know, this feeling that the decision has already been made, and despite that, you keep going. So I just want to commend you for that. I do also want to sort of emphasize that, Mr. Wheeler, you pointed out that, you know, student surveys shouldn't be used to make important decisions, like whether or not to close a school that's serving the largest proportion of high-risk students in the city. And I think it's interesting that that is being used, and yet, as you pointed out, over like 98% of the feedback that they got at their public input sessions was also a survey of sorts, right? But they are not taking that seriously at all. And in fact, I wrote a letter to Chancellor Farabee, asking if there was a possibility of keeping the school open for another year with resources, possibly moving it to a more accessible location. And the response was a sort of list of, we heard this, we heard this, we heard this, and clearly they did not hear what you actually were asking for. So I just want to point that out. You have 34 seconds. I was going to ask you to read the rest of your,
This is what the new thing that they're doing. So they're taking the data from the community meetings and they're using only certain parts. So we've heard this multiple times. This is where they try to get us. So they'll say, oh, we hear everything that you're saying, but you got to admit the building's bad, right? And so of course the kids will say, yeah. So they're like, okay, then we'll give you a new building. And we're like, well, wait a minute. You have to separate the building from the Washington Met family. You can't blame us for the building that you put us in 6 years ago and then say that's the reason that you're closing it. But that's like their way to try to confuse us and to try to separate. We had that happen already once today, once from Brianne, who said the same thing at the meeting you were there too. And she was like, but you notice how it's almost like a talking point now, because they'll stop and they're like, I heard everything you said, but you got to admit the building's bad, right? The building was bad 6 years ago, so you're going to take accountability for that? No.
Right. So I just want to say I hope that the mayor at this point, who is going to make the final decision, will take this opportunity to rebuild trust. And this is really, I hope the lesson that the students will take away is that your advocacy matters. And I just want you to say, whatever happens, your advocacy matters, and that you have been heard by a lot of us. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor?
Very quickly, I don't have any questions for you tonight. I just want to say thank you very much, especially to the students who came here tonight, and especially the mothers. Both of you have very young kids. Is your child about 8 weeks?
Ooh.
6
months.
6 months. He's 6 months. I have my child 6 months. He's a little one, and he's sitting here asleep. And I just want to say to both of you, thank you for being here tonight with your children. It really shows how important this is to you, because you could be at home putting your children to bed right now. You could be doing so many other things. I'm sure you're exhausted, and you're here to try to save your school. So thank you again for all your hard work and your advocacy on this topic.
You're welcome.
Mr. Batchelor?
I want to thank you all for coming this evening, and I'll just say at the outset, and I'll be very quick, and really want to give you time to say any additional comments that you might have. But quite frankly, achieving equity in our education system, it really first and foremost requires an equality of respect, right? An equality of respect for all of the people in our city, all of the young people, all of our stories. And I think what we see in a pretty brazen announcement mid-year to close your school is an inequality of respect for your stories and for your needs, and that's a shame, and it's a crime. And so, like many of the members of this board, you have our support in, for sure, delaying the closing until there's a fuller conversation with the district, but also, I think, for me personally, ensuring that communities like Washington Met stay afloat, because we know school looks different for different students, and you all have spoken very clearly and very eloquently about why this different space is important to you. And I saw that some of you were down at the Wilson building earlier today, and about a year ago it seemed that members of the council and the mayor were deeply moved by students coming to the Wilson building. We hope that equality, right, of respect translates into making sure that you get the space and opportunity you need. I know you had.
Well, I will just say I agree with you. What ward are you from?
Ward 8.
Ward 8, perfect, because we have a lot of students that travel from Ward 8 to our school, as you may have known.
Absolutely.
But so when we went to the mayor's today and discussed with one of the staff members, we were told that we needed to, was it 2.5 weeks? long story short, when we confronted them about the fact that Banneker just showed up and got a meeting, they denied that, even though that we know that that was true. So again, you see the inequality of what happens when we show up and when another school shows up, and it just, we see it everywhere we go, and that's just the sad fact. But it happened again today, and so other kids are like, well, I don't understand. I heard Banneker came up here and everything. They made things happen. We come up here and we're pushed around and people aren't here, and we go to one floor and we hear that they're up on the 4th floor, so we go up there, and then they went it's just sad that the kids have to go through it, and to really see how the world is. But it's just the second part is we have to continue to show them that there's hope in this, and that not only are their voices heard, but they can make a difference as they get older, as they become voters. I think Lyrics, especially one of them, one of the leaders that will really grow from this and take something from this. We were also on the news yesterday giving out food down in Noma. I don't know if anybody saw that, but that was another connection that they were able to make around gentrification, being moved, being displaced, losing a home. It was a great story, a sad story, but they're still fighting, they're still trying to give back, and it's just really amazing.
Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. O'Leary?
Representative Batchelor was talking about equity, and what we need in this city is equity for the most needed schools. Not equity, it's not ever going to be equitable. But what y'all need, and I just want to thank Ms. Hawkins for showing us how to get your child back in order. That was wonderful. But the thing about it is don't give up the fight, all right? Because momentum can swing, and we will advocate for you as much as we can, because I taught at Cardozo for 40 years, and I know that several of my students transferred to Washington Met, and it was very helpful. And I have friends who are on the faculty there who let me know immediately when you all had the faculty meeting, I guess, in December, and we'll do what we can do. But
and what we're asking, I feel like, is very small. There's an abandoned building. There's abandoned buildings out there. We're a small school. Give us the resources that were in our budget in the first place, and to us, it's a very simple solution, and that's why we feel like it's already been made, and there's already how would I say, either something for the property, or there's future plans, because we've heard rumblings that at least a year and a half ago, people were told that Washington Met was closing, and that's why it was taking off the redesignment plan. And so that was and if that's true, we would understand that, but then you're having kids enroll during the year thinking that this is going to be their school in the future, so the parents are lied to, the community doesn't believe anybody, and so this is kind of like this spiral that we're seeing, and it's just like transparency. We're not really getting it from our leaders. That's what we feel like. In a small school, so now we're going to be down to 3 opportunity academies?
No, but don't give up the fight.
Right.
Because the community, because they're hearing you, you're getting publicity, it's out there. And you have to hold the people in charge accountable for your children's lives. So I commend all of you for, especially, I know how hard it is to get up in front of a microphone and talk on TV or whatever you're doing right now, but y'all did a great job.
We're on TV, we didn't know that.
You're on cable.
That's it right there.
You're on cable. And it plays all night long.
Well,
So people may come up to you on the street and say that they've seen you. I have 2 questions. The first is to Lyric, who opened by talking about the lies that were told, and you just went through one, but I would like to hear specifically what if there were other lies, what they were. And the second, which is really to everybody, is I really would like a picture of what the engagement was. I mean, to what extent was there sort of an early discussion with student staff in the school, and then what happened?
Well, there were many lies told, but when we got the proposal, they mailed us a letter with the other opportunity academies on it, which was Rose Stay, Blue Stay, and Luke Seymour, and they list the opportunities on there. we're all opportunity academies. Where are our opportunities? They want to move us into these schools where the opportunities are better, and when they could have just gave it to us from the jump. We had $5,500 trailers sitting outside our school that was supposed to be used for the cosmetology, barbering, other things that students can jump into because college isn't for everybody. So the trailers just sitting out there. It was actually students that used to go to our school that were homeless who actually broke into the trailers and started sleeping in there. And now the trailers are still out there. If you ride past or if you look it up, they're still there. So that's one of the lie, but that was years ago. They said that when I first got in Washington Met, which was school year 2017 through 18, they said that. So that was one of the lies that they had actually told. And another lie, oh, right. They said we were supposed to be designed. Actually, I remember we had our old assistant principal, AP King, when she actually said, 2023 was on the list to be redesigned. And now we heard, like Mr. Willis said, we're off the list. That was another lie, that we supposed to be redesigned. We don't, they were supposed to give us more, like, we don't have art and other things that we need to get credited to graduate because that's a credit, and we don't have that. It's like all these selling us dreams, basically, and we believe them because it's coming from the top dog, which is DCPS. So they're just selling us dreams.
All right. Thank you. We'll leave it at
President
that for
Wattenberg?
now.
Yep. May I have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Great. Thank you all for coming. I know that this is difficult work, but it's really important. And I'm going to implore, I've done this in private, maybe I should have done this in public more often. The DCPS central office has got to start listening to our communities. They don't. They make decisions from the central office and they say, trust us, we got this, we know best. If you don't have input from your communities, you're going to fail, and we need to work harder at that. DCPS needs to work harder at that. With that, I'm going to yield 90 seconds to Dr. Gasoi.
Thank you so much. I'm going to yield time to Mr. Wheeler to finish your testimony. So what you didn't get to read, if you would like.
It wasn't anything, I would say, if you don't mind, I would like to continue what Lyric said.
Sure.
So I've been at Washington Met for 5 years, and the hardest part about this for me was that I was in it and I saw it, and I didn't really realize it was going on. I was one of the kids. It's like all of a sudden we don't have one art teacher. I'm like, okay, well, we'll work through that. All of a sudden we don't have another teacher. It's like, okay, we'll work through that. All of a sudden we don't have a library. It's like, okay, I'll work through that. All of a sudden, who I work for, the Department of Behavioral Health, they're saying, oh, you're going to get a social worker. I'm like, perfect. We never got one. Everyone else got one. Then I realized, oh, why we didn't get one? Well, because they were planning to close us in the first place. So they were just telling us that we were going to get one, and we didn't. And all of a sudden, we don't have a basketball team. We don't have any sort of sports. There's no music. And all of a sudden, I look at it, and I'm like, how did I get here? And then they're saying that we're closed. You know, and that's what it's like to be in a school where you're basically oppressed from a system, and you don't realize that it's going on. And I feel like I'm a semi-intelligent person, and I didn't realize that it was going on. Like, it was a huge wake-up call when they said that they were closing, and then I started to realize all the other opportunities that other schools were getting, and how important it was for us to speak out. Now, of course, I wish we would have spoken out before. We were really excited to get, I don't know if Lyric knows this, we were really excited to get Lyric on the Chancellor's cabinet. I know that seems small, but that was a really big deal for our school, so we finally had a voice with the Chancellor, right? Now, did he listen to her? That's another story, but at least we got into the, into the building, or into the meeting, and maybe she could speak more about what, she kind of told her, but again, it falls on deaf ears. The school has basically been depleted. My own thoughts, and Lyric and other people can say that, is that people have been slowly transferring out since the beginning of the year. We don't really know why that is. We now assume it's because they were going to close it and didn't tell us. And so for the most part, it's sad to be in the school, but what I'm taking from this is the power of relationships and the power of attachment-based relationships, and how people can still be resilient and still get to where they want to go. Now, of course, we want our academics to be better, but we're showing you the model of how you can create a small school with relationship-based and how you can improve. Because otherwise, if you think about it, like, why would they even be here? If they're getting nothing besides math and reading, what's the point of even being here? It's the relationships that they're building. So you give us the academics and the resources that we need. We're not asking for a lot. We're just asking what we deserve, right? What every school deserves. And then we can really see how this works. And then what you'll see, in my opinion, is you'll start to see not as many missing females and missing males because sadly, I look every morning on DC Police Twitter to see which one of our kids is missing. Which one, who's been killed, who's been shot. I could go on and on about what's been happening at different schools. But it's like, these are our lost students, and I really think that we need a school for students that haven't worked out anywhere else, and that should be a safe haven for them.
Thank you very much. I will entertain if there are other people that want to ask final questions or make comments, or we'll move on. Ms. Batchelor. Wait, Ms. Williams.
This has been a very interesting and informative discussion. Thank you. This has been a very interesting and informative discussion, and all I can say is that my heart reaches out to you and your community, and I'm sure that we'll do everything we can to help with the problem, and call on us again. Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor.
I just say very quickly, and we've done this on other issues before, and I think because it's in my colleague Dr. Gasoi's ward, I'd love to sign on to a letter and would invite any colleagues who'd be willing to sign on to a letter to DC Public Schools to talk about either delaying or eliminating the closure of Washington Met, especially at the end of this school year, and I think requiring a more intentional and respectful engagement with both the Washington Met community and the broader community, including so many residents in my ward and in wards across the city who rely on Washington Met for this type of instruction.
May I respond? Thank you, Mr. Batchelor, for that suggestion. I think it's a great idea, and I would actually invite my colleague Karen Williams also to, maybe we could co-draft this, since many of the students come from wards 7 and 8. And I think we need to do it immediately, because I know that the decision is supposed to be made any day now, by the mayor.
And so let me just say, I think that's a great idea, and one thing I would suggest is when the letter is drafted, we might circulate it to the board, and the board would have to vote on it, but maybe we could send it over as a formal board letter.
Sorry, can I speak real quick? So let's say the school closes at the end of the month. Can we come back and then also ask for particular things at how we would like to finish out the school year to make it the best that it could possibly can, that the transition that we can actually, is there a way to create a policy to force them to make sure that the transitions are ongoing?
So the policies are made by DCPS. We cannot make the policies, but we can urge, we can reach out, we can sort of use our voice to try to encourage that. So I would absolutely recommend that if that happens, talk to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks all of you for coming. Much appreciated. I think we all learned a lot tonight.
Thank you.
And again, thanks to my colleague Emily Gasoi for the piece that she wrote in DC Line, which was terrific. I recommend it to everybody. I tweeted it, but it does do a good job of putting that out there. And also to my colleague Jessica Sutter for her previous thesis.
And we will say that, like, she didn't just write the article. Like, Emily's been there from day one, and we really respect her and appreciate what she's done.
Me too.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody. And thanks again for coming. I know it could not have been easy. Okay, I'm going to call up our next panel. I've got Laura Fuchs, Tiffany Brown, Caitlin Cocilova, and Nina Abelson.
The copies of the testimony.
If you can give it to staff, we'll bring them up.
Tiffany.
He doesn't want to leave.
Many of us have been there.
That's our new student member. That's our new student member.
Right. Okay, our next panel, I'm going to start from the right. So each of you introduce yourself. You've got 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes to speak. Please note that you must use your mic. Your mic is already on. The light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, then it will turn yellow for 30 seconds, and then it will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. Please begin when you are ready.
All right, good evening. So it's a tough act to follow, and I am going to be speaking on Washington Met and trying to read the testimony I was unable to read last month, just due to my own emotions. So all of us in this room must take responsibility for the proposed closure of Washington Metropolitan High School. It is all of our faults, but I'm looking specifically at every person who voted for this STAR report card and at Aussie, who perpetuates this toxic environment where school communities are devalued, where the relationships of teachers, students, and parents hold no value at all, where adults make decisions that impact children for their own benefit. Our students see you, Aussie, and your EdFest. They see you and your little press conferences. They see you on all your little all-star tours. Where don't they see you? Doing the work that actually helps the students in this city. Where don't they see you? Conducting the oversight that would not have allowed DCPS and this mayor to systemically disinvest in schools like Washington Met, depriving them of stability, adequate resources, and the real programming that would give them a shot at being successful too. Where don't they see you? Demanding real investment, not some tiny little grant that barely does anything. Fighting for equity, not equality, something you clearly don't understand at all. They don't see you valuing our students. They see you judging them from on high. They see you standing by and feeling satisfied with yourselves for your work, far away from the students in these office buildings downtown doing nothing, while a school community gets proposed to be ripped apart. They see your phony engagement sessions and listening sessions and faux interest in what they have to say, and they aren't fooled. I am outraged at the way this city treats our students who are struggling. We say we're investing in them, but one, we don't. Two, the investments come with an implied threat. If you don't fix things in a short amount of time, you will be closed. How dare you sit here and act like what is happening with this report card is okay? This is exactly what we said was going to happen, and here it is. Aussie should be ashamed of itself. If you think this nonsense is helping schools and students, you are delusional. Here we are on the verge of our first DCPS closure directly tied to your system, and if you think it will stop here, then you have another thing coming, and this is on you. The students of Washington Met are standing up for their school. They delivered a petition today with over 1,200 signatures to the mayor. Listen to them on WPFW. Read what they have said in the Washington City paper. They are not impressed with what you have done to them. They're not inspired by your paltry little STAR metric. Shame on you. Do better and fight to save Washington Met.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, SBOE board members. My name is Jaclyn Cocilova, and I'm an attorney at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. The Legal Clinic envisions and since 1987 has worked towards a just and inclusive community for all residents of DC, where housing is a human right and where every individual and family has equal access to the resources they need to thrive. On a personal note, I'm a soccer coach at Thompson Elementary School, a former legal representative for kids in delinquency proceedings and school suspension hearings in the district, and I also come from a whole family of educators. I'm the first lawyer. I'm here today to share thoughts also and to oppose the proposed imminent closure of WashMet. I can't, like Laura said, do better than the last panel, but I'll do my best to provide a slightly different perspective because this is really similar to the same tactics that we see used in the housing realm when properties are trying to be turned over. I first learned about the proposed WashMet closure in the DC Register and then attended both of the community meetings in December with one of my colleagues, Will Merrifield. As attorneys focusing on land use, observing these meetings left us with several questions and many more questions than answers, a couple of which are, what does DCPS want with this land? Is it part of a land swap deal, which we see all the time? Is it going to be included in the McMillan Park development down the street? Is it going to be connected to something on U Street and Shaw, et cetera, et cetera? So the future plans are clearly opaque, and for that and the following reasons we oppose the closure. First, as I mentioned, DCPS is using the same tactics to close WashMet that are used by landlords, management companies, and owners to displace people from housing. DCPS has stated WashMet should be closed due to low enrollment, underutilization of facility space, and low rates of student engagement. And these assertions, as you know, don't paint the full picture at all. We see these tactics used with tenants and homeowners being pushed out of buildings by private and public landlords in order to make changes within their neighborhoods. I can go into further detail with that if I have time at the end. Secondly, DCPS, as you know also, made the initial decision to close WashMet without feedback from the people in the school community. The process for closure has been much more conclusory than collaborative. Prior to that letter that was sent out in November, no one to public knowledge in the school was consulted about its closure. And according to a response at the December 9th public meeting, DCPS didn't consider any alternatives to the closure, as was also mentioned. Additionally, Chancellor Farabee briefly attended both of the meetings, but he had to leave before he heard any public comments, so he just sat through the DCPS presentation that was also available online. Neither meeting was recorded. Third, WashMet is adjacent to Howard's campus, which offers access to educational resources, mentors, and partnerships. Due to its proximity to Howard, WashMet's location offers prime access to role models, mentors, perspectives on future college opportunities, productive educational partnerships, etc. There was actually a rep from Howard at the December 12th meeting who talked about how they opposed the closure because they didn't want to see kids who were sent from their neighborhood schools having to go back to their neighborhood schools. They were worried about that. So I'm sure there may be some openness to doing some sort of collaboration, and there's definitely money in the $15.5 billion budget to make that happen as long as the will is there. In conclusion, based on the information granted to the public and the compiled feedback from listening sessions, the public's consensus is clear to not close WashMet at the end of this school year. The data provided by DCPS that's being used to justify the closure is unsubstantiated, not detailed enough to be meaningful, and inconclusive. Closure in this way also counters DCPS's and this board's goals, as shown in the written testimony that I have in front of you. If DCPS has additional information that better justifies a reorientation of its programs, we're more than open to consider that. But as of now, they have not substantially provided that information, so we oppose the closure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Hi, I came to speak on a broader subject specifically of the STAR grading system. I've been a teacher in DC charter schools for over 10 years as a special education teacher. Just like a student with an individualized education plan due to his or her unique disabilities and skills, DC schools all have so many specific qualities, which is why they cannot be all condensed into just a 5 summative STAR system, which apparently has been a huge factor in where we are right now tonight. As a big example, I taught at a school with 95% of the student population below the poverty line, and 80% of the students had IEPs or BIPs. And another school I worked at had a much higher percentage of Hispanic students, and my ESL coworker had over 40 elementary and middle school students on her caseload. Currently, I work at a school with a higher number of students on the autistic spectrum than other schools that also have IEPs, and this is quite different than any other kind of specific learning disability. I spoke today with a speech and language provider for her opinion on the subject because she is a contracted related service provider that visits multiple DC schools daily, ranging across the board of what people have a perspective of DC schools, which is very, very all or nothing, shall I say. And she wanted to point out that it's not just about ranging resources, it even is about the physical buildings. I am now at a school that has a sensory room for the SLP and occupational therapists to pull students, but I previously worked at a charter school, which was closed, that was originally a church and it had so little space that the classrooms were only separated by dividers. And these are just some reasons why it is a skewed rating system. DC schools are extremely segregated as children get older. Some parents may be more accepting of multiracial and cultural environments for their younger kids, but progressively move to different neighborhoods or get into lotteries for different types of charter schools that are more homogenous. Certain charter schools achieve higher enrollment and thus higher money, and because of this, parents lean towards a positive rating, and this is a cyclical reason why schools continue to have more resources or are bottoming out. These can be affected by students' socioeconomic and special needs populations. but that cannot be just but that cannot just be what is looked at in the percentile overviews. And then on the flip side is we can't have the arbitrary 1 to 2 star schools receiving funding for progressive improvement while others do not. We should have a more transparent, trying to go through here quickly, just having the DC State Board of Education in accordance with OSSI to try and analyze and determine what assistance schools may be getting for improvement and for different issues. The system could also be transparent to parents that have important branches of subtopics, specifically special education.
Thank you all very much. We can have a round of questions, so if there are members of the board who would like to ask questions or comments, is that it? I'll start with Dr. Sutter.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. I wanted to particularly call out, and I apologize for not being sure how to pronounce your last name. Cocilova. Thank you, Ms. Cocilova. I wanted to just sort of echo what you said about the failure to get input from students, teachers, staff, and families, or to have adequate public hearings in which this was considered. I think I shared at the last meeting we talked about the closure of Washington Met. My experience in school closures was with the Public Charter School Board here in DC, and all school closures are painful. There's no way around that. What I think, though, I wonder why we haven't seen in DC public schools is the same sort of public airing of a plan to close, an opportunity for public hearing, an opportunity for public comment, the due process that exists within the charter school world. I know there's a lot of folks in this room who don't particularly love charter schools, but I think that the process we see in the public charter school world in our city is one where there is both a set schedule, a set of protected rights under due process for a school, as well as adequate time for both public hearing and for hearing from the officials responsible for the closure, their justifications in front of the people who will be affected by the closure. So mostly I just want to thank you for all that you've said here and echo that, and I'll yield the rest of my time.
Which is 32 seconds. Okay, Ms. Gasoi.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for testifying, and I guess I just want to say in response to Dr. Sutter's comment about the charter schools, I think in general that is true. I would just say that in Ward 1, unfortunately, this is the second school closing in a way that is just really astounding and shocking and unacceptable. And the first one, of course, was of Chavez Prep. And that was also done, last minute, very little planning. So I will just leave it there that it happens across sector. And it's, of course, hurts me personally that it's been in my ward twice. So, but I did want to ask a question of, I'm always so bad at this, I'm so sorry. You at the end. Yes.
Nina Abelson.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about branches for different subtopics, and I was wondering if you said special education specifically. Can you say a little bit more what you mean about that? Yeah, flesh that out.
Certainly. Well, again, in regards to what you could see in just a particular school's demographics, but also we were learning or speaking much earlier about 0 to 3. One school I've been at has where I'm now has a very adequate, above par of what I've seen elsewhere, preschool and pre-kindergarten program, whereas it's not included in the information. It's just marked as the lower school, and that is very, very different for some parents that might be coming in with a 3-year-old versus some parents that might be coming in with transferring schools that has a 5th grade student. And so there are so many nuances. That's just one example of what is it that we are combining all of this information upon, like, all of the lower school. Well, how does that break down? How are the teachers for different subject areas specific to their training for that area.
Right, thank you. So it's really about nuance that is lost. Yeah, thank you, that helps.
Mr. O'Leary.
Yes, Ms. Cocilova, in your testimony in number 1, you said DCPS has stated WashMet should be closed due to low enrollment, underutilization of facility space, and low rates of student engagement. Okay, so that defines why the students are at Washington Met, right? The same reason why when Banneker students, which are rated very high on the star rating, they're at Banneker because they have a high enrollment, they have a facility space that's overutilized, and they have high rates of student engagement, all right? So when the students got to Washington, if you don't know what the student body of Washington Met is when they get there, and what Washington Met does with them while they're there, and where they are when they've finished, then, but see, the DCPS has said, well, we're going to get rid of the school because they're underachieving and not giving the students a chance to achieve. And that's the problem. That's why this has to be fought with tooth and nail, so that the students get a chance to utilize. From what we heard, I mean, those students have to fight to get to school. And then when they get to school, they don't have facilities. They don't have extracurricular activities or anything like that. And then the system penalizes them for not living up to an unequal system. Is there anything that anybody in our listening area can do to help Washington Met stay afloat? And I'll open that up for either.
And I'm going to grant Fraser Jessica's 33 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment that you just made highlights exactly why all of the efforts that the students and the staff and all the folks who have been organizing around this have been so important. It's really easy to just make statements. We can talk about equity all day. We can talk about wanting to give these things to students. We can talk about wanting our students to thrive, wanting to, all of those catchphrases that the mayor uses constantly to make people think that the city's doing well. And those same things have been stated to the students. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is to elucidate what the reality is behind those statements. So all of the things you just said, those can be defined in very different ways: low enrollment, underutilization, et cetera. Until you break that down and actually talk about it in the context, it's going to seem as if, oh, this is inevitable. Like, this is a good thing. Like they were saying before, your building's already bad anyway. Don't you want to shut it down? Look at all of the public housing units that we're about to close down. I mean, this is what I mean in terms of the parallels between what we see with housing and what we see with schools like this. Who's controlling that? Who's controlling the maintenance of those housing units? Who's controlling the maintenance of the school? Who's controlling how many staff or support staff are in the school? So I think one big thing that all of us can do, because it sounds like every single person that I've heard talk is very educated about this, is to talk to other people about it and use your positions to do that. I think the letter's a great idea, especially coming from an advisory board. And for me, working in the housing field, I've been sharing this with a lot of people just to say, hey, look, it's not just about housing. It's actually about schools. It's about all of this stuff because it's all connected into one system, and the same people are being harmed over and over again. The fact that the kids were down there serving the people under K Street in those encampments, first of all, no one should have to be there, but the fact that they're making the connections that people are being displaced in various ways over and over again is huge. And unfortunately, they should not have to do that at their age already. They feel it, but that's the reality of the city that we're living in. So I think the more that we can talk about that, the more that we can make those connections, use whatever power and influence we have to make those shifts, the better.
I'll just say very quickly, thank you for your advocacy. I think between the stories we heard of folks a part of the school community, and I think the expertise at this table, my hope is that more rational heads will prevail in this decision. But if not, I think to your point, it signals the need, and to Dr. Sutter's point, it signals the need for a fundamental change in the way we do things in our system. And hopefully this is the impasse in which we actually do something different. But I think it's so important to add voices to these decisions, add stories to these decisions, because that is at the center of why this school community is so important. And I think when we get through, the process and bureaucracy, we forget that schools are communities, and that closing, a school is the tearing apart of a community. And the fact that there's such disregard and disrespect for that and for that feeling, I think is a shame. But I thank you all for your advocacy on behalf of our students, but also on behalf of our families every day who need advocates because they're getting the short end of the stick every time. And so thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you for coming. First, Ms. Abelson, thank you for coming and talking about the star rating. It gives us food for thought. We will be talking more about this as we go through the spring. So what you've raised is already helping me think about that, so thank you very much for coming. I want to really use the time to talk about Washtenaw, and I think the right person is Ms. Brown, but Ms. Fuchs, you may know about this as well. My question really is what I raised last time, but there was too much to cover. My question is, I would just like to understand and hear what the engagement process was from DCPS to students and staff and families at this school. I mean, what happened, what didn't happen? Wait.
I mean, I can't answer it as well as those in the school, but I am in communication with the union pretty frequently about Washington Met, trying to stay abreast. So, I mean, there were a few times where they met with teachers, mainly though to discuss transition plans from the sound of it, and like what rights teachers would have upon, being excessed from the system. So, I mean, it really, to me, sounded like those meetings were kind of a done deal, and kind of presented as, well, here's what will happen next. And, give us your asks now. And the unions filed a grievance about that, because that's a problem. That there was a meeting with students that occurred between the two public meetings. They went back to see the students. So there were two public meetings that were announced, one at Washington Met, one at Martha's Table.
After the announcement, before the announcement?
It was after the announcement, or it was kind of like combined, right? Like the announcement was made, and there was like, and by the way, in a few days there'll be these two meetings. We're like, what? Right?
So there wasn't a conversation. That's what I'm trying. Was there some sort of conversation, discussion with people to get input prior to the announcement? Sounds like these discussions came after that.
Not publicly.
The register that I learned about it in was the November 29th DC Register, and that was the announcement for a meeting that was going to happen on December 9th, I think. I learned about the December 12th meeting, which was the second of those two public meetings at the December 9th meeting. Like Laura said, they can speak way more to this than I can, so I'll do my best, especially as an outsider, but I think that's kind of a good perspective too, because that shows that how the public was supposed to know about it to be able to engage in neighbors. And yeah, like Laura said, I think there were and there's a whole DCPS listing of their engagement process, but all
Is that in your testimony?
It's not, but I'm happy to give it to you. It's online on the DCPS blog, and that's where they compiled the responses from the December 9th and the December 12th meetings.
If you give it to our staff, it'll be part of our record.
Okay, sure. And I'll email that link as well to you. But that lists out how many stakeholders that they say they engaged and what the feedback was from folks. All of that work happened post-letter going out. So it was after the announcement was, we're thinking about closing the school. It wasn't, we're thinking about doing something, or we've heard, this feedback. Let's have a conversation about whether we need more resources, whether we should consider shifting the location of the school, whether we should consider closure in the future because of whatever. No, it was, we're thinking of closing the school at the end of this year. Now come and talk to us about it so we can listen to your thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, for informing us. And as we said, we're going to be sending a letter, so we may be including some of this as well.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you have testimony that wasn't already submitted, you can bring it over to that table. So tonight we're going to continue our discussion about early reading instruction, about screening, about dyslexia. We started this last month. I want to credit the Parents Group Decoding Dyslexia DC for raising this issue and building support for addressing it. Parents and teachers who are interested can reach out to the group at decodingdyslexiadc@gmail.com. I'm going to call our panelists down, Dr. Robin Barr, a senior instructor with Washington Literacy Center, Ellen O'Neill, executive director of the Atlantic Seaboard Dyslexia Education Center, Katrina Hilliard, director of elementary school of the Sella Elementary Charter School, Mary Clayman, director of the DC Reading Clinic with DCPS, and Jaclyn Pilette, reading interventionist with DCPS. While you all are coming up, I'm just going to, well, first of all, hello. Some of you I've talked to on the phone. I want to say this hearing we had last month, it was also last year, and today really grows out of a discussion that began at the DC Council around the issue of dyslexia and how it was or was not being handled. And the Council is, we understand, considering legislation that would deal with this, that might, we don't know how they would deal with it. And so one of the things we thought we could perhaps offer as a board here is to collect some of the information about what some of the best ways might be to provide the needed education for our teachers and for our staff and principals and so on, because whatever effort is made in this area, in the end, I think it comes down to what do the professionals in the schools know, what tools do they have. And so that's sort of what we're looking at, is possibly making some recommendations in that area. So you all are being invited here to talk to us, to give us some ideas and advice about what that might look like. And I think all of you in one way, yeah, you're all connected to that in some way. So I'm going to start here with Dr. Barr.
Okay. Is this on?
Yes, and I'm supposed to read these. All your mics are on. Use your mics.
Okay. Do you all have the handout? Right. My name is Robin Barr, and I'm linguist in residence at American University, and I'm a senior instructor at the Washington Literacy Center, which has been serving DC residents since 1963. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Closer, okay. The students at Washington Literacy Center are adults who read English at below a 6th grade level. There are many reasons for our students' low reading level, including head injuries, speech disabilities, and lack of literacy in their native languages, but by far the main reason is undiagnosed dyslexia or other reading disabilities. I've been asked to come here today to give a quick review of the general scientific consensus about dyslexia, the psycholinguistics and brain information about how reading is actually learned in the brain. The most recent research within the last 15 years or so. And since I have to do it in, how long do I have, 5 minutes? So that's why you have pictures, because otherwise it's hard to describe. So I may go fast through some of this, but if you have questions about any of this, because it's not going to be totally clear, everything I know in 5 minutes is hard to do. So the first point I want to make is that dyslexia is not a single monolithic disability. So this is important because there are many different kinds and degrees of this reading disability, which is why many in the field prefer the term specific language impairment. I don't actually find that a useful term, but people say, well, there's no such thing as dyslexia. Well, that's what they mean. There's not one thing that's dyslexia. In 2013, researchers at the Yale School of Medicine identified several different genes and gene combinations, up to 50 different kinds of dyslexia that are associated with familial dyslexia, in addition to anything else that's not, doesn't run in families. But there is a common factor in almost all of the cases of what has been called dyslexia, and that's problems with what's called phonological awareness. This is a language processing difficulty, not a problem with vision. So you may see articles about, we have special glasses for dyslexia, or we have special lights for dyslexia. That's not where the problem is, at least as far as the research is showing it. The second thing I want to point out is defining phonological awareness. this problem is the problem of segmenting a word or a syllable into its component parts. So for example, somebody who has this problem will not know that cat has 3 different sounds. It'll sound like one sound to them. So that's where the issue is. People with this problem will have trouble identifying things that rhyme. So the last vowel and consonants like bat and fat. Assonance, matching the vowels like black cat. Alliteration, matching the initial consonants like big bad bear. Or sequencing, identifying the first or next or last sounds like the T in pat versus the T in tap. Right? Now, turn to the next page. The diagram on page 2 shows you something about the structure of the brain. So I don't know, this is a very superficial overview, but the structure of the brain, the human brain specializes itself into several different faculties or intelligences that handle particularly important functions like language, spatial relations, face recognition, and so on. This is adaptive because having the neurons close together is more efficient. But it turns out that reading is not a function that the human brain has adapted for. So look at the map brain map on page 3. Probably 95% of typical English readers create connections via the inferior parietal lobule, which is also called Geschwind's territory. This is a very recent thing that's been discovered, although Geschwind found it in 1976 in autopsies. But we have now evidence from functional MRIs that this is, in fact, the part of the brain that is not functioning properly in dyslexia. Look at the lower figure on page 3. You see on the left side 3 areas lighting up in an fMRI for a non-impaired, a non-dyslexic reader, and only 1 area lighting up for the reader who is dyslexic. The yellow area for the dyslexic reader is lighting up on the other side, but the red area is where the parietal lobule is, the Geschwind's area. That's what's missing. The brain is different in somebody with dyslexia. I'm going to skip over part 5, except to say that you can see a picture on the next page of somebody with dyslexia compared to a normal reader. This is looking at the brain from the top, and even when these are young adults, even when they are trained, they get remediation, they still don't get Geschwind's area back. They instead are able to compensate in the right hemisphere. And so they can eventually learn how to rhyme things, but it's still going to take them a long time because the neurons, the neural impulses have to go all the way around the whole brain instead of being located in one area. The question? No.
So we're over. So I'm going to ask you to sort of pick the most important. We'll come back with some questions.
So my point is that early intervention and early detection of dyslexia is so important because it changes the structure of the brain and it enables the students to learn how to read using the closer, more efficient parts of the brain. And there are various tests you can do that are not difficult for screening, and it's even cost effective because if you don't do it, it costs more in terms of lost workforce, lost opportunities, social service programs for all the people who are adult non-readers.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. O'Neill?
Hi, my name is Ellen
And
O'Neill.
to explain, we're going to go through the whole panel, then we'll come back and ask questions. And also, I want to say one other thing is, I so appreciate that you guys stuck with us during all that. We don't always know how many people are going to be here during public comment, and we also don't know in advance necessarily how much interest there's going to be on the board to ask a lot of questions, and clearly that was a very important panel, so I appreciate that you stuck with us.
Absolutely. Do I need to? No, you can hear me. Ellen O'Neill, Executive Director of ASDEC, Atlantic Seaboard Dyslexia Education Center. Actually, I'm grateful and indebted to all the speakers who've been here this evening. I always learn. And in fact, I would want to call out one speaker in particular, one of our high school students who was here, who gave a very direct and passionate appeal when asked what they need the most.
Reading
and
180.
she described reading intervention. She actually went on, almost as an expert, like my esteemed colleague here, Dr. Barr, to say something very specific about ineffective and inappropriate reading interventions, computer-based reading interventions. And our social worker indicated even further something I hadn't thought about, which was how particularly painful they are because they lack human content. They also are, in fact, there's no research to support their effectiveness. That's by way of saying that this continues to be a problem. You saw the human fallout, you see the human fallout, and it's been around for a long time because Dr. Barr teaches the adults who also were failed in this system. You're not alone in failing to teach students. I have parents contacting me every day looking for effective reading instruction, and there's been an increase in those who are willing to move. And they call and they ask what district they can go to find public education to teach their children to read. There is one district in the area. I work in Montgomery County. It's not that. I live in Prince George's County. It's not that. It is not Northern Virginia, and it's not the District of Columbia. It's Frederick County to the north. In late 2017, they decided to try to change the course of reading failure affecting their students. They tried to also change the course of early identification. And they made an investment in comprehensive professional development training, and they made a commitment to train a teacher, at least one, but actually two, in every one of their 67 schools. In 2018, through a competitive proposal process, ASDEC won the contract to train teachers. To date, we have trained 104 teachers. Happily, there are teachers at every single school in the district, elementary, middle school, and high school. There are 104 teacher specialists who are currently trained. Several of them have gone on to achieve national certification as academic language practitioners, a very distinctive position in the country. Frederick County has made a commitment not only to bringing in trainers to teach a course, that happens everywhere, it happens in the district. What they invested in was 9 months of rigorous supervision. The teachers are subjected to very rigorous supervision and accountability. They must practice the procedures to mastery. If they do not, they will not move on to the next stage. All but 3 actually have completed supervision to mastery, and they are having a noticeable impact on the more than 500 students that they're working with in the system. Frederick County didn't stop there. They also hired academic language therapists who have paid for their own training at a master's level. They've trained for 2 to 3 years in 20 months of supervision. These academic language therapists are bringing intensive one-to-one therapy intervention to the most severely dyslexic students in the system. And these academic therapists are delivering the kind of services that only wealthy families can afford when they hire my private academic therapists. So in fact, a public system has decided to bring equity to its students to try to end the cycle of failure and close the achievement gap. There's struggles in the implementation, and I will say to you, to bring it back to DC, what matters is having a schoolhouse leader, a principal, decide that this will work, decide to give the interventionist who's been trained the ability to teach that 50-minute lesson every day to fidelity. When that happens, change happens. So in fact, the good news is that's happening here in DC at Creative Minds Public Charter School. There was a great teacher there who persuaded her school to fund her training and certification at that practitioner level. She began working with students, and the results were so stunning that the school then sent her on to continue her training at the therapy level. Her name is Christina Brown, and her testimony has been submitted to you. She was eager to share that with you, and also eager to say that the difference is that she participated in the supervision and that her principal is supporting this and sending an additional teacher to get trained. That is one school in your district, but it can happen. In Frederick County, I'm sure you're all saying, how much did it cost? To date, it's $350,000 to have that impact. Those teachers will stay in that system and continue to teach those students, so it's a long-term investment. And we know that because several of them who are senior enough trained in a program similar to this 15 years ago. They never forgot what they learned. They used it surreptitiously. They were told not to. They came back for this training, and they're among the best, and they will go on to become supervisors themselves because they never lost that science of reading once it was invested in them.
Thank you very much. Sylvia?
Hi. I want to apologize because my statement isn't specifically about dyslexia. It's more about our reading program at our school.
That's great. That's
okay. So
that's what it's all about. That's fine.
Thank you. So good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to give you information about Sutter Public Charter School. Opened in 2013 in Ward 4, Sutter Public Charter School has a very diverse student body and faculty that reflects the multicultural and vibrant dynamics of the nation's capital. Sutter has been recognized as a high-performing school by DC Public Charter School Board. The school offers an academically rigorous curriculum, including daily modern Hebrew studies that leads to high levels of language proficiency. Sutter has grounded its curriculum in learning standards currently in use by excellent schools across the country, including other language immersion schools in DC and in Hebrew language schools in other cities. In kindergarten through 5th grade, Sutter builds the foundation for successful readers and writers through the use of Pearson's Ready-Gen English Language Arts curriculum. Ready-Gen is an integrated and well-balanced approach to reading and writing instruction for grades K to 5. Authentic text with modeling and teacher-directed activities drive learning and motivate readers. Students read authentic literature, literary and informational texts. Instruction focuses on reading, writing, speaking, and listening in response to those texts with a framework of the workshop model of instructions. Students read from 12 authentic texts at each grade level. Interactive anchor text helps students engage and blend technology. Texts are carefully selected to reinforce themes. Backwards mapping helps students meet Common Core in Aussie ELA and literacy standards. Instruction provides specificity, time, and sequencing for cumulative progression. Everything in a unit is designed to prepare students to respond to the performance-based assessment. Modeling, scaffolding, and closed reading strategies support readers with complex text. Integrated intervention is included for skills improvement and intensive remedial instruction. To support our special education students, we use Orton-Gillingham. Orton-Gillingham is a multisensory reading intervention program highly recommended for students with specific reading disorders. Students learn to identify and write sound and syllable patterns such as digraphs, blends, suffixes, as well as open and closed syllable patterns. Vocabulary and comprehension skills are also addressed, as well as sight word reinforcement. Students are given a baseline assessment and monitored weekly to determine progress. And I just added this piece because I remembered it. Recently, at a PD last Monday, we studied a book. It was called From Lab to the Classroom, where we studied how the brain works and the science behind teaching reading. And so we're going to study that text as a team, and then apply what we're learning from that text. But the impact of the new curriculum, supported with the support provided by our special education team, the impact has already been seen. Recent test data has shown an improvement in our reading scores from the same time last year. This is our first year with Ready-Gen, and we're really, really excited about what we're seeing in our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Clayman?
Good evening. My name is Mary Clayman. I direct the DCPS DC Reading Clinic. I was a teacher and licensed reading specialist in DCPS and DC charter schools for 12 years. I currently serve on the board of the Capital Area International Dyslexia Association, or IDA. Last year, the Reading Clinic began training DCPS teachers in the science of reading and structured literacy. Our graduate level course follows the IDA's knowledge and practice standards. Excuse me. We cover reading development, the theories of leading researchers, the National Reading Panel's recommendations, functional MRI scans of proficient and struggling readers, as we saw at the beginning of the panel, the diagnosis of dyslexia, and more. Most importantly, our class is a clinical practicum. In addition to over 20 hours of coursework, our teachers provide 20 hours of intervention to DCPS readers in a one-on-one setting at our 2 clinical sites. During this process, they're also coached by a mentor reading specialist. In total, our awesome teachers commit between 60 and 80 hours on top of their regular teaching duties to learn more about the science of reading. As Sarah Seiko testified last night, the Deputy Director from the National Center on Improving Literacy, she testified last month, for the highest level of training, both coursework and job-embedded coaching are critical. DCPS understands that teaching reading is rocket science, as Louisa Moats asserted over 20 years ago. It takes intensive training, like I myself have received, to truly learn how to intervene with struggling readers. DCPS's commitment to launching the Reading Clinic last year, in addition to several other initiatives, reflects this understanding that truly, to change the trajectory of our students, we must begin training teachers more intensively. This is one of the key components of our early literacy or theory of action. On behalf of DCPS, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who came out during last year's council hearing to speak out about the dyslexia bill, both there and in other venues. I'd like to acknowledge the courage and bravery it takes to come forward to share those experiences. Based on that testimony, my colleagues and I at DCPS are committed to doing more to ensure an efficient and effective way to train more teachers and help more readers. And while we recognize that need for improvement, I do also want to share how DCPS is already employing many of the practices that are actually recommended by IDA and leading researchers. So the first thing would be screening. DCPS uses the DIBELS screener, which is in fact the first recommended screener from IDA's screening guidance. So the DIBELS screener assesses the 3 most pertinent red flags for dyslexia. That would be letter naming, phonemic awareness, and nonsense word reading. Further, DCPS is exploring training its teachers on an additional DIBELS subtest called the dyslexia screener that could further explore struggling readers' weaknesses. Second, progress monitoring. DCPS teachers are required to progress monitor the students identified well below benchmark every 10 instructional days, and centrally based staff and instructional superintendents can monitor those checks. Third, regarding our Tier 1 instruction for general education, DCPS provides and supports implementation of a program called Wilson Foundations to explicitly teach phonics in the way that readers need. DCPS also provides and supports implementation of a well-regarded program called Hagerty Phonemic Awareness for kindergarten classrooms. Regarding Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention, DCPS schools have access to intervention programs including Wilson's Foundations Double Dose, Wilson Reading System, Wilson Just Words, Lexia, Spell Read, System 44, Read 180, and others. Note these interventions do vary across schools. We're working to ensure that in all cases, students are targeted for the appropriate intervention and that the interventions are implemented. Last, with fidelity. Lastly, regarding training, DCPS's investment in the Reading Clinic is a clear indication that DCPS believes in supporting teachers through robust training opportunities, and we recognize the need to do more to reach more teachers. I do want to take the opportunity to share some additional steps that DCPS and the Office of Teaching and Learning has taken since that hearing last year, and we hope to do in the coming months. OTL recently began a monthly dyslexia task force, which is a subgroup of an existing K-2 early literacy group. Our key priorities include exploring a range of ways we can leverage DCPS's resources and practices to better serve students with dyslexia. As a first step, we are committed to defining dyslexia for our teachers and staff and to creating a handbook to address common misconceptions, instructional best practices, and other considerations. We anticipate that handbook becoming available before the start of the next school year. Other priorities include, but are not limited to, exploring that training on the DIBELS additional screener, creating a tiered plan for professional development, and more. We aim to engage with parents and stakeholders along the way and have already met with representatives from Decoding Dyslexia. We're fully committed to providing better education around dyslexia in combination with other needs a student may express. In closing, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share DCPS's perspective on this important topic. I welcome any questions after Jaclyn.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jaclyn Pilette. I am currently a reading interventionist for kindergarten through second grade students at a DCPS elementary school. I've taught students ranging from pre-K to third grade for 10 years. I have a master's in elementary education and am Montessori trained. I've had many interesting realizations. I have begun to focus my career on literacy instruction. Much of what I learned about literacy instruction came from my Montessori training. Remarkably, I did not receive any explicit training on literacy instruction as I pursued my master's in elementary education. Luckily, the skills I gained from my Montessori training were mostly able to transfer as I transitioned into my current role. However, I still felt the need to strengthen my practice. During my search for the best way to go about improving my literacy instruction practice, the DC Reading Clinic was formed, and I had the incredible fortune to join as a teacher. There, I was paired up with a mentor who helped me as I planned lessons for a second grade child who was struggling with reading. I also attended weekly classes that taught us the science of reading and the guiding principles of structured literacy instruction. The DC Reading Clinic illustrated the importance of not only teaching sound letter association in order to decode words, but also how incredibly important phonemic awareness is for students to have a strong foundation in reading. As I internalized the knowledge I was receiving from DC Reading Clinic, I began to take a closer look at what was happening at my school. There was no instruction in phonemic awareness at the time. Foundations was being used in the general classroom, but our test scores were showing that it was not enough. The majority of our students were still struggling. This year, I provide weekly professional development for kindergarten through second grade teachers. Our focus for the entire year is small group literacy instruction. It has been eye-opening to learn that the majority of the teachers have had very little training in literacy instruction from the various teacher prep programs they have attended. These are all amazing teachers who have the energy, drive, and will to create wonderful classroom experiences for our students. However, the skill to identify learning gaps in students' reading ability and then create a trajectory of learning to target those needs is lacking. I believe this is not the fault of the teachers, but rather an issue that starts with teacher training programs and ongoing professional development for DCPS educators. They need to properly prepare teachers to be empowered literacy educators who can meet the incredible variety of needs their students will have. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was terrific, all of you. Thank you so much for being here. So we will do a round, and it's late, so I'm going to look at both you guys and us guys. Sometimes we would do a second round, and I'm just going to look and see if that's going to be okay. But we're going to start with the first round. I just started this going this way, so I'm just going to.
All right, great. Thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you to everyone for your testimony, and a special thanks to Mrs. Clayman, who was my colleague once upon a time ago. My last year of teaching, I think your first year of teaching. Yeah. Very exciting. So question about the DC Reading Clinic specifically. So I represent Ward 6, and I've been asking at every Ward 6 school I go to for them to tell me about how they teach reading. So what is the scope of the Reading Clinic? How many teachers are involved from DCPS now? And what's the plan? Is it a phase-in? Is it voluntary? Does everybody get to go through this at some point? Tell me more about that.
Sure, and great question. So we just opened in the beginning, is this on? Of 2019, and we've trained 28 fully so far. We have 16 more.
That's what you get for asking.
Oh, asking if it was on. Right. And we have 16 more this cohort. It's a paid position. It's 60 to 80 hours of work, and so there is an application process. It's also important to know that teachers do get graduate credit in addition, so they can use part of their stipend to get 3 hours of graduate work. So it is a paid position, so teachers apply. And so every year we'll train approximately 48 teachers across 2 locations, one in Ward 5 and one in Ward 8. Does that answer your question?
Does. And so my second follow-up at the last 30 seconds is, I know there are a number of schools who are devotees of Readers Writers Workshop. That was actually how I learned to teach reading when I was early in my teaching career. So can you tell me about how DCPS is thinking about the connection between this reading clinic and teaching the science of reading, and how that plays out in schools that may have sort of a history with other programs?
The guidance around the K2 literacy block, and I can also talk about the 3-5 literacy block, but the guidance around the K2 literacy block, when most of this structured literacy would take place. It's over 90 minutes of time, and it's broken down into obviously different chunks, because K2 students can't do one thing for 90 minutes, but 30 of those minutes would be structured literacy or this Wilson Foundations program. There is time for interaction with other authentic texts. Reader's Workshop could be one of those, but I can loop back with my DCPS colleagues and share with you some of the guidance around the block.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you all for your testimony and also just for all the work that you're doing to help struggling readers at your various locations and really across the whole range of ages. So really appreciate that. My question is actually similar to Dr. Sutter's. I'm just struck in reading about the reading center, or clinic, that it is optional. And it seems, I mean, are there plans to scale it up? I guess that's my first question. And then I was very interested in your testimony about what's happening in Frederick, but what struck me is we have a lot of teacher turnover. And so you could train a teacher and then they leave the school. So it made me think, would it make sense to have full-time staff members who are actually there at each school training teachers? And I'm wondering if that happens anywhere in our country. And I think that is enough for you guys to answer. I have more questions.
You want to begin?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking that. One of the distinctive components of our relationship in Frederick is that we want to build their capacity to continue professional development. So from the start, they had somebody from central office train. She is trained and she will be supervising, and at some point she will be the instructor. And so they're really smart about this. I mean, they're talking about continuity because for too long, districts have invested in some element of professional development or some element of a Wilson program, and then it disappears. Some element of it disappears. And so we have worked along with them so that they don't need us. In fact, we're actually trying to pull out, and they keep bringing us back. But that is the idea, is to build their capacity so that they can sustain this. And another thing, you know, I talk in, especially in Prince George's County, which wrestles with you guys about finding and keeping teachers. I do know there's studies that when teachers see their impact, then retention is increased.
Yeah,
you can just say really quick.
Great. The clinic would be the highest level intensity for training like this. So this is a clinical practicum that reading specialists would be required to do. So there are other tiers of training, but that would be the highest intensity level. Does that make sense?
Thank you all for being here tonight. As many of you know, this is issue very personal to me. I do a lot of work around literacy. Dr. Barr knows outside of my board and day job. My question for you guys, I open it up to the panel, is can you discuss some of the impacts and barriers that your students face when they have undiagnosed dyslexia or other reading problems in school and or in life generally?
I can talk about the impact on the adults who never found out that they had dyslexia. They basically have educational trauma. They've been traumatized. They hate school. They never want to see school again. They may have dropped out, or they may even have degrees, but they still can't read. They can't fill out forms. I think somebody at the previous panel talked about how they couldn't fill out the forms to get a job. They may get hired through one of these DHS programs with certification, but then they get fired in 6 months because they can't do the work because they can't read. So that there are all kinds of problems, but the biggest problem I'm seeing is really the lack of self-confidence and self-respect. A lot of my adult students, when they discover that there's actually, they can be taught and that there's a reason why they had trouble in school, their self-confidence just goes way up, and they're able to get a job and look for, be more productive.
I think too, you know, when you talk about any public health model, you talk about early identification and early intervention. And through fMRI studies, they can detect dyslexia as early as 15 months, which
I'm
Dr.
okay.
Gab.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
But at any rate, we're not going to bring fMRIs into your early childhood areas where you're even looking for funding for that, just to run a childhood center. But what we would know is that the anxiety and the depression for because of lack of being able to read is intensifying, so that by the time we typically identify students, which is grade 3, because for some reason we've decided they have to be 2 grade levels below, these kids then present as behavior problems, and they're put into some other kind of special education program, which costs more money. So ideally, like any public health, if we can identify them, which we can if we're using DIBELS here in DCPS, and if we then can intervene. We've had DIBELS, but we haven't done anything once we find out. If we can intervene in kindergarten and 1st grade, we reduce that trauma, we reduce that anxiety, we reduce those behaviors, we keep kids in school.
What do you think about rapid automatized?
Should be absolutely included in the screener.
You think? But I don't think. Well, I'll discuss that with you,
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
I will say also that my students, are K through 2, and a lot of my job is just bringing up their confidence. They already feel it in kindergarten. They feel a difference between what they're able to do and what their peers are able to do in the general classroom. And so even being in a smaller group where everyone's kind of around the same level that they are, that just brings up their confidence so much. And my job also, I feel like, is bringing like a love of learning and a love of reading to them, to make it exciting for them, and them want to go back into the classroom and show off what they just learned.
Yeah. And I can echo what everyone else has said. And the biggest thing is the low self-esteem. They're not engaged. They become easily frustrated about the learning process, and they hate school. So those are the things that we see, and then try to combat to build up their confidence and change. Then sometimes they'll have a fixed mindset, and then trying to change that into a growth mindset just to help them and encourage them that, you are smart and you are able to learn this. So, yeah.
I want to say one more thing. Because I'm teaching adults, it takes them so much longer than when you're teaching the children. So we use the Wilson system, but we don't get, we maybe get 3 levels in a whole year, if that. And it's designed to, your Wilson reading system goes, or what the foundations, you can get up several levels in just a few months with the younger children. So the sooner you can do intervention, the faster it will be as well.
Thank you very much.
Questions over here? Ms. Williams.
I'm sorry I had to leave the room, but coming back, I had a question in my mind, but it's been kind of answered. The earlier you intervene, the faster or the better for the student, or in other words, a pre-K student, say a 1-year-old, can you intervene at that early age?
What we really see in the youngest of children is are there sound correspondences and sound segmenting, and that is the most critical pre-literacy skill. Likewise with assessments. So if we can assess that, our Montessori teachers are doing some amazing things with our earliest learners. So you might say, well, why would we even think to do that with a 1-year-old? We have what we call the grandmother core in my clinic now, where a number of us are looking, at there's a strong family genetic inheritance, and so we're expecting to be growing up a lot of dyslexic grandchildren. So you can better believe these grandmothers are working with 1- and 2-year-olds. But generally, systemically, we really would be talking about pre-K. And then finally, just on early intervention, there's a lot of interesting research on neuroplasticity. And we know that with regard to language processing, by age 8, your ability to process language is much more difficult and belabored. It doesn't mean that we don't intervene there. And an example is Dr. Nadine Gabb, who does this research, is not a native English speaker. She's a brilliant woman, but she speaks with an accent. And what she will tell you is that if you are acquiring a second language and you do that before age 8, you're likely to be able to speak without an accent. And so she speaks with a heavily accented English, and there's a lot of research there. So the idea being that before age 8 is ideal.
About the grandmother corps also, Washington Literacy Center is starting family fun days where the adult students bring their kids in, and we teach them games to play, so rhyming games, songs to sing, the kind of thing that you can do with the younger kids, because as you said, there's such a large familial component that it'll help the parents and it'll help the children. So I think I encourage that grandmother corps. I never thought of calling it that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've had great panels about this topic. I have 4 short questions for the. I'm going to leave you out, Dr. Barr, because you've already answered one of my questions. I would like to know from Ms. O'Neill about why don't other public schools, these are quick answers, all right, because I've only got a minute and 30 seconds. Why don't other public school systems run to spend their money on something that will help those who need a key to success? Because if Frederick County is becoming successful, why hasn't Montgomery County, DCPS, PG, Virginia, whatever? What's keeping them from modeling what you're doing?
You know, some people have talked about it. There are the reading wars where there's still an adherence to something called balanced literacy or whole language. The idea, the misunderstanding that by teaching foundational reading skills, we are just teaching phonics, and that we will discourage children from the love of reading. And what we'd say is they cannot love reading unless they know how to read.
Exactly.
And they've also invested an awful lot of money in a whole bunch of different curriculum that they feel that they need to keep. So there's the paucity of understanding the science of reading, and then the commitment and the investment they've already made.
Great. At Sella, I want to mention that Sella is a Ward 4 school, and it's a hidden treasure. And you were very lacking in talking about these. It's a dual immersion school with Hebrew and English, and it's. I've been there a couple of times. I was there on Sunday for the open house, and it was just amazing listening to the teachers. I'm going to run out of time. My question for Ms. Chapman was, please get in touch with Ms. O'Neill so that DC can partner with you.
I've been trained in Miss O'Neill's clinic.
And my last question, where's my last question? Oh man. It was just agreeing with the last sentence of Ms. Pilette's testimony. We need a better system to ensure that our students are set up for success. So that now 3 of you can partner. Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us and sticking with us as the hour gets late. I really appreciate, again, kind of the continuum of what we need to really adequately serve our students with reading disabilities, professional development, right, proper diagnosis, intervention with fidelity is something I heard, right, with fidelity being, I think, the key phrase. My 2 questions, and this is really for anybody who thinks they can best answer it. One is, we also know that for students to really adequately read and maintain reading, that also having books at home and having reading at home is just as important as instruction in the classroom. My first question is, and I'll ask both and then kind of let you all have it, what supports do parents need or families need to best support students with dyslexia, especially parents or families that might also have learning deficits? And then my second question is, I think, to probably Ms. Hilliard, and Happy Founders Day.
Thank you.
My thought was, would language immersion or learning multiple languages, right, or practicing in multiple languages help with decoding kind of scientifically at all? And maybe that might also be from Ms. Barr too, but.
I can talk about that, but you can too, right?
You can, I'll defer to
Okay.
you.
One of the problems with Hebrew versus English is that Hebrew, number one, goes in the opposite direction,
Right.
and number two, doesn't always indicate the vowels, which is one of the problems that we see with dyslexic students. They tend to skip over the vowels because they can't feel where they are in the mouth. So on the other hand, learning multiple languages is a great idea, but I'm not sure learning to read multiple languages at the same time is the best idea. What do you think?
Well, they're not. In the upper grades, they're reading. In the lower grades, it's listening.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Okay.
That might help.
Mm-hmm.
And then family supports, parent supports.
The family support, I have to disagree with you on something, sorry, but it.
That's okay, you're the expert. So.
You could have the most book-filled home, you could have the most enthusiastic teachers, you could have the most loving environment, and if somebody's dyslexic, it still won't, they still won't read unless they have this kind of targeted, explicit instruction in decoding. Now, granted, this is only 15%, well, 15 to 20% of the student population, but the rest of them often will, everybody else will learn how to read, doesn't matter what system they use, right? People learn to read with whole language, people learn to read with
a small percentage.
Yeah, so I mean, but there's that last percentage that none of these other models will help unless you actually address what the problem is.
What we say in multisensory instruction is multisensory instruction benefits all learners, and it's essential for dyslexic. And all learners in the district mean English second language, means students who come from low SES backgrounds where books are not in the house and literacy is not there. What parents can do who love their children is expose them to language. If it's their maternal tongue, they should do that. Yeah. They should expose them to core knowledge, to build up their background knowledge, which is so lacking. And that means taking them to the district, taking them to battlefields, to museums, to interactive. Our dyslexic kids in particular learn best with hands-on conceptual approaches. Dr. Marianne Wolf, who's a legendary leader of this field, does say the number one thing that a parent can do, if the parent can read, is get a library card. Because our kids need to be surrounded by content that they can't read themselves until they've gotten that instruction, and they need to be exposed to language, podcasts and audible books. There's a lot that can be done in our libraries, our community centers, and our early childhood.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. This has been great, really terrific. That said, I'm going to focus mainly to start with on Ms. Clayman and on DCPS. And the first thing I want to say is I've heard so much about the reading clinic, and none of it has been anything but exceptionally complimentary. So congratulations. I know it's a hard thing to get off the ground, and really I've just heard, seems like, I don't know how, it's only 12 people a semester, but somehow they're everywhere. And I really, congratulations to you, to all of the teachers who have been going through it, and to the folks at DCPS who put it together. So here's my question. It's 24 people a year.
48 people.
48 people a year, 24 semesters, 48 people a year. And as everybody has said, and Ms. Pilette said, most teachers who enter the system don't have good training in this. They don't know what to do. They don't know the best way. They don't know the up-to-date research on the best way to teach reading in their K-2 classroom. So we're talking about the regular classroom teacher, not the reading specialist, which I think is what your program is training, and they are desperately needed. I hope soon there'll be one in every school. But so my question to you is, can you talk about what DCPS one is doing about that issue? How do you sort of scale this? How do you get to everybody? Who do you think you need to get to quickly? How much, and if we have time, I'm going to ask others, how much time should it be taking? And Frederick had an example. Because part of what we want to do is advocate for you. To sort of think about how could we as a city promote this. Should we do something like what's being done in Frederick? I mean, should we provide that kind of, should we try to get the council to provide that kind of support to DCPS? Or somebody else talked about something where, I forget if it was tonight or last time, where you could put together sort of a, look, here's what every K teacher needs to know, and then you could ask local universities, nonprofits, whatever, to make it available and, you know, require at some point over some timetable that all K2 teachers or K3, you tell me, take it, but there'd be some funding for it, I guess similar to what the funding is in Frederick. So that's really my question. I want to start with you guys, and then if we have time, or maybe I'll take the first part of the next round to let people answer, and then we can go to another round. So, starting with you.
Sure. And I just ignore this, correct? Can I?
Gosh, I don't know. I really didn't mean. Wait,
Okay.
did that start over for me? Oh my God!
I
I'm
just am
so sorry.
I
I'm
will
so
try and be as
sorry.
brief as possible within.
really
So yeah, I'd like to address your questions in a variety of different ways. The first is to recognize the real issue on a national level with training. There are only 11 states out of the 51 states or jurisdictions that require a test of reading. A test of reading knowledge for gen ed or special education teachers before they enter the classroom. And I can loop back and get you some of that information. Many states don't require, and that through licensure, that teachers know about the science of reading before they enter classrooms. And so this is both a university issue and a licensing issue. And so often many university programs, graduate or undergraduate, aren't set up to teach teachers about the science of reading. So our graduate level course does follow the knowledge and practice standards. So there is a bigger issue here about training and licensure. DCPS is committed to try and work with that issue and fill that gap with the clinic, if that answers that question. And then I want to answer your questions about who we're affecting, what types of teachers. And so we have teachers who are general education teachers, and we also have special education teachers who also need this type of training, and reading interventions like Ms. Pilette herself, and ELL teachers. So we have kind of the range, and the hope is that general education teachers, when they learn the science of reading, they more effectively teach the structured literacy programs we already have. There are multiple studies that prove that an expert teacher behind the same curriculum has better word level gains, which is one of our key indicators, than a teacher who has no expert knowledge. So the idea is get expert teachers behind any curriculum. And I think you asked about scalability. So DCPS is committed to doing more to train more teachers at these different levels of intensity. I know that you had asked about levels of intensity. The reading clinic would be the most intensive level. 60 to 80 hours over the course of a semester is a lot. And so we're exploring ways to make sure that more teachers have access to the science of reading training at, as you suggested, President Wattenberg, different levels of intensity. I hope I've answered your questions about, you know, the general need for the program because of some national issues around training and licensure, and then also how we hope to affect lots of different types of students. One more thing, with the general education teachers we train, the hope is that they stay in DCPS for a long time, affecting many, many students into the thousands and tens of thousands eventually.
That was great. And at some point, I would like to talk with you or others about sort of how it can just scale up faster. So I'll leave it at that. I've gone over. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to, if other people have another round of questions.
I'll yield my time.
You yield your time? Thank you.
Well, you know, when you're talking about scale, the state of Mississippi trained 10,000 teachers, and the results are extraordinary. And that was through a collaboration between and among higher education and the schools. They did have a large funder who was able to support that as well. But you know, Mississippi is often considered, when you're talking about performance, well below the rest of the country, and they have truly turned it around in a remarkable amount of time. So they are worth studying. And right, again, north in Pennsylvania, a number of counties originally had pilot programs and then pilot funding. The state supported this through state legislation. And then other counties, they called it flying without a pilot. We're so envious of those counties that were having such good outcomes that they joined on their own. And among the earliest of adapters and supporters was the teachers union, which was remarkable because many of these teachers were being asked to put extra time in. But once again, We should believe in our teachers and believe that when they are effective and when they're given the right tools and they see the kids change, they want to do it. So you have lots of opportunities to look elsewhere to see where there's some good models.
Did you want to get in on this sort of models for scaling up? Others? Okay.
I would just say, as you know, I don't know about the models and everything, but as someone who's gone through this, you don't really know what you don't know. So until you're faced with it, and it's, you know, the face of a child. So when you're in front of a child and you're like, oh, I really don't know how to help this child, it feels terrible, because teachers get in it for the right reasons.
That, by the way, is a lot of what was talked about at the hearing when the teachers talked, was exactly that point.
Yeah, and also the idea of funding around it is really helpful too, because, you know, after you get out of grad school, you think you've been properly prepared, and then being asked to pay for more training feels very daunting. So that was one of the things that was so appealing about the DC Reading Clinic was I'm willing to put in the time, but the fact that I'm being compensated for my time is also really, really helpful and appreciated.
Thank you. I have a question for Ms. Clayman as well, which is, since early detection is so important, I guess I'm just wondering what are the issues related to the additional DIBELS subtest? Like, what are you exploring? What are the challenges? And then my other question is just kind of building on President Wattenberg's, which is there exploration around partnering with local teacher training programs? Thank you.
Regarding the additional screener, so teachers K through 2 already use the DIBELS screener, which has many of the subtests that are recommended by the IDA. And it takes a fair amount of training to get them to norm on those subtests. So say in kindergarten, I believe it's 8 subtests. Ms. Pilette probably knows better than I do. And so each of those subtests has to be normed. So teachers receive training at the beginning of the year and then throughout the year from our partner Amplify. So initiating another screener can't be done overnight just because every single teacher K through 2 would have to be trained. I would say that's probably one of the anticipated roadblocks, but we are definitely open to exploring that. And then your second question, I believe, was about partnering with teacher training programs. And I think that's actually probably one of the things we'll try and look at it on the Dyslexia Task Force. And I can circle back with my OTL colleagues who cover training more generally about your question.
Thank you so much. Other questions over here?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, actually. Excuse me. Ms. MacLeay.
Thank you all again for being here this evening. My final question is for the DCPS or student group specifically. By 3rd grade, we see that if students aren't reading by grade level, they are more likely to struggle academically. They have higher rates of dropping out of school altogether. I want to mention this question because it came from a constituent to the board, and I greatly appreciate when our constituents are interested in the work that we're doing. Can you discuss and talk about the fact that I can't remember the exact statistic right now of the amount of students who are graduating who cannot read on grade level, not reading at a 12th grade level, okay? It's almost half. Do any of you have the actual
70%.
Yeah,
it's
more
71%,
that,
I think.
And
That's
then in certain subgroups of African American English language learners, it exceeds 70%.
Okay. That's an enormous figure. My question from the constituent who was is a former teacher, he asks, can you talk about and why we are promoting students currently, even if they're not reading at a grade level, that prepares them to meet the standards of the next higher grade? Obviously, it compounds upon itself. Why are we doing that? Obviously, it sets them up for failure in life. We've seen and heard about the impacts that these students face throughout their entire lives. Can you discuss why we're doing that and
being held
what we're
back
doing?
is also a problem. I mean, some of my students or had to repeat a year, but they didn't get any better because they were taught the same way the second time as the first time. So promoting them is no worse than keeping them back if you're not teaching them the right way.
Retention of students isn't really in my purview, so I'm not prepared to discuss that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I think, though, that the other thing you have to consider, and I only know these statistics in Maryland, are, to your point, there are students who graduate without proficiency. Some of them become first in their family to go on to community college. When they get to community college, they then must enroll in remediation courses, particularly in algebra, but also in reading. Those are non-credit bearing, and yet they cost money, so those students are more likely to drop out. And so it's a condemnation of the K-12 system that they then get passed on to community college. And I suspect that happens in the district as well. So I think
it does.
Yeah. I think the question actually has to go back to the system that is perpetrating this.
You mentioned math. One thing I wanted to point out is that most of the problems that people have with math are actually verbal problems. They cannot read the question. They cannot understand the story problem because they cannot read it well enough to understand what they're supposed to do. If they just had the numbers, they might do better. So that's so reading also impacts math.
You're so absolutely correct.
Anyone else? Okay. I thank you very much for your time this evening.
Any other questions to my right? Mr. O'Leary.
I taught English for 47 years, and I'm not going to make up a statement reading is fundamental, but it really is. But this requires a sea change in the systems. They have to understand that if somebody can't read, that they're guaranteed to fail. I don't want to be an alarmist with that, but that's what it is. When Ashley was talking about grade level reading, all right, my students moved their grade levels by the end of the year because all they did was read and write the whole year. But it's unrealistic to think that a student's going to, if a student comes in and they're 5 grade levels behind, they're not going to get to the highest level. That's not important. The importance is that they're able to get out of school being able to decipher a text, being able to fill out an application. And so this is the most important thing that we can do for our students. So that's why I'm still trying to get you all to get together so that DC gets the reading clinic has more than one room.
Right.
Because
I also want to point out that one of the big problems is the diagnosis of dyslexia. People are so reluctant to say dyslexia, to diagnose somebody as dyslexic. And what that means is that the students do not get accommodations later on. They do not get the recorded books. They do not get extra time in the classes when they get to a higher education. So the earlier the students are identified, the more access they will have to the accommodations that they're entitled to.
Which ties right into that birth to 3. Because if we can identify students at that, whatever that earliest age is, then we can work with those students. If they're not identified by the time they get to kindergarten or the 1st grade, then we're in big trouble.
You still can in kindergarten, 1st grade. It's the 3rd grade standard that has been prevalent.
The 3rd grade is
right. I like your idea to go early, and we can, but don't lose hope at kindergarten, 1st grade.
All right, a couple of very quick questions. First, people talked at the very beginning about how, I guess it was you, Dr. Barr, about if you get children early, that actually you change the brain, and so they are not dyslexic going forward. Is that a fair, how would you, that's my question, how would you define, how would you?
Yeah, that, I don't think that's been shown by fMRIs. Do you know anything more about that?
No. It's once you're dyslexic, you're dyslexic.
You're dyslexic.
In fact, there are gifts that come along with that. What we do say, and we're very careful about saying, we're sort of redirecting neural pathways, and we can see that through fMRIs. You're still dyslexic, though, and you may always be a slow reader. Yeah. However, you're going to be much more open to effective instruction prior to age 8. And your pace will be more quick, and you will also not suffer the anxiety that we've talked about.
You'll be able to compensate.
And you'll be able to compensate.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we cannot deliver this effective Mary Clayman's intensive one-to-one with middle school and high school and adults. It's just optimal if we can do it early.
My next question is again to Ms. Clayman and to DCPS, which is the screening. And as you described it, it's not an easy thing. It's not like, oh, here's a screener, people, now screen. And to somebody's point about the high turnover, at some point, teachers in a school might have been given a screener, but that doesn't mean all the K2 teachers or K3 or whatever know it now. So my question is, and I understand, I want to just be so sympathetic. I know that people over there are working so hard on this and took very seriously what happened at the dyslexia hearing. So I am just an advocate for you getting what you need to do this well. So it's hard to teach people to screen. A lot of people say we need the second screener. I'm not an expert on it. It's going to take a while to build that out. And I wonder if there is something that could be in place prior so that families and teachers for that matter, who really think there's an issue, have a place to go. Because I will say, and I am the parent of a dyslexic child who didn't get helped until 5th grade, and that's because Louisa Moats told us to take him to Linda Mood Bell.
I have to say, I'm not crazy about dibbles. I don't think we need to go through all of that, but that's my opinion.
All right. That's something we're going to want to hear about, and we'll get back to people. But I wonder if there's a way, I know you guys have an ombudsman, we have an ombudsman, if there's a way to make it clear to parents and teachers that if you think there's an issue, go here, or, call Ms. Pilette, call Ms. Clayman, I don't know, call our somebody so that this doesn't go on for years, because that's what happened to us, but it's what people talked about at the hearing, and you know that parents who talked about it going on year after year after year with teachers, principals, whatever, saying, this is what happens, it's developmental, I believe it's going to kick in, and then you're in 3rd grade, you're in 4th grade, and you're still not reading. So.
Yeah, sure. To address the Dibble screener, so the screener we give now, those 8 subtests, has the three most pertinent red flags for dyslexia. So there's a white paper, you can read it from University of Oregon, who does a lot of the research in this area, that looks at the most important the most important indicators for later reading deficits. And they obviously have done tons of research on those metrics, and they developed the Dibbles 8, which our teachers, it's the new version of Dibbles, which our teachers are giving this year. And so that already includes, I just want to be clear, the 3 most pertinent red flags for dyslexia. There's a lot of knowledge that has to be understood by the teacher to understand that Dibbles screener. And so I think I can definitely work with my team at OTL and DCPS to understand more and more about how we can get teachers to understand more deeply and communicate with parents, more based on the data, but that Dibble screener does have those 3 red flags. And for your more general question about communicating with parents, that's something I'll have to loop back with my team about. And you're right, it is an issue that we heard loud and clear at the council, and are very committed to making sure that we address the issue in our schools.
That brings us up to the end. If somebody else wants to get in quickly, they can, but otherwise we are at adjournment. Normally we have business at the end of our main panel, but we did that early, and so we are ready to go. So is there any new business? You guys can go, if you would wait 1 minute.
That was abrupt, but thank you, yes.
And if anybody who wants to wait, I'll talk to you when you're done, because I'm very interested. But you guys were terrific. It was really terrific. Yeah, on behalf of all of us. Is there any new business, members? Okay, no. All right. We are, with no further business, is there someone who would like to offer a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Oh, we have to vote for adjournment. Sorry, I'm never going to get this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You never said in your
Na-
testimony that you're amending.
Now we're adjourned. And thanks to the board too for staying with this. It was, I thought, great.
Hmm?